Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us here at the Nerd Rage Gaming 1K for March. My name is Dan Hugar. I'm here with Frank Mintmeyer, and we are going to be talking with you guys throughout a lovely, lovely day of the Pokemon trading card game. So, just kind of to start off, Frank, do you want to introduce yourself to the people and then maybe give them reasons why they should listen to you?
Sure. Well, hello. My name is Frank Mint. Oh, sure. Hello. My name is Frank Mintmeyer. I recently moved to the NRG area about roughly 2 years ago during COVID. However, I play a lot in Georgia, so I know a lot of people from all over. I attend lots of regionals, so I'd say I'm pretty well known amongst some of the people. In terms of recent success, I made day 2 at the Knoxville Regional Championships with Arceus Duraludon, so I know a little bit of what I'm talking about, and I'm excited to join you here today.
I should also note that Frank is a Duraludon fanboy to a degree because he also got top 8 at Milwaukee last summer with Duraludon VMAX and Arceus. Am I right in that?
Yes, you're right
All
about
right.
that.
So the man knows his stuff, at least with giant building person. And like I said, my name is Dan Hugar. I'm also a player of the Pokemon. Not quite in the same level as Frank, but I've gotten 2 global top 16s of the Players Cups. Got top 64 in day 2 at Worlds this past year. So I at least know what most of the cards do. So we're going to jump off straight into a matchup of what you'd consider 2 meta decks. We have Lugia V-Star piloted by Alec on the left here, and then we have Mew V Max piloted by Larry on the right. So, Frank, can you tell us a bit about this matchup and what each player is trying to do?
Sure. So obviously, Alex starting off is very great for him because in this matchup, if Larry's able to go first, and as you see in his hand already, he does have Path, Judge, and a plethora of Battle Pass, so he would be off to a roaring start if he went first. However, luckily for Alex, since he did go first, he's going to get at least 1 turn without having his board pressured immediately, which is going to be very important. Additionally, Larry does not play either the 1/1 Aerodactyl V and Aerodactyl V-Star, which has been a recent inclusion in Mew to kind of slow down this Lugia deck, which seems to be relatively unfazed by Path to the Peak once he gets those Archeops down. Again, since he's going second, that Aerodactyl may not have had as great of a presence. However, if Alec is off to a slower start, which this Lumineon going straight away for a supporter as opposed to Lugia might signify that it does have a good hand and that he's not going to be falling behind.
Well, I think that's definitely an interesting decision. And to your point, I agree. I think I was talking to someone about this on the ride up here, but Lugia V-Star has an excellent an excellent matchup against Mew if they get to play the game. So if they get 2 Archeops down and they get started, Mew's going to have a heck of a time. But if Mew can go into the game and get that turn 1 path, get that Judge or something, then Mew can be in a great spot. To that point, I don't know if I completely agree with going with the Lumineon right now because Larry plays Judge. So there's not a guarantee Alec's going to hang on to his hand, and that means there's no Lugia V on the board.
Well, yeah, I don't know if he actually is able to play a quick ball. I think that Lumineon might have just been straight from the hand. So I think that he was trying to just dodge a path to the peak, like a soul path to the peak, as opposed to the Judge, hoping that Larry's hand may not be as great as we know it is. Obviously, Alec's start is very, very subpar, so it's as if he's going second in this matchup and has to bench a 2 prize liability. So Larry's definitely happy about that. And as you mentioned before, Alec preemptively benching this Lumineon and grabbing that Professor's Research is not going to be to his benefit here, as Larry's likely going to play that path and Judge.
Well, and actually, Alec used an Ultra Ball, discarding an Archeops and a Stoutland V to go get the Lumineon. So,
Oh, he did?
Yeah, just a little curious. But on Larry's end, another decision I'm kind of curious about is he only got 3 Pokemon off the 2 Battle Passes. So I have to wonder, what is in that man's prizes? Are those the only ones he had available?
Yeah, that's very surprising. I mean, this matchup typically you want to look for at least 3 Genesect, potentially 4, depending on the presence of your opponent's board and whether or not you plan on Psychic Leaping in the future. And as we see that Judge coming down without the path, I think that is rather indicative of his prize cards, as he doesn't want to dig before playing that path. Rather, he wants to dig after and look for a follow-up. So he probably doesn't have much draw support left, and as you mentioned, it's all in the prize cards. So he's going to be looking to use those Genesects after this Judge.
No, agreed. And I think there's definitely something to getting that board set up after the Judge, knowing that Alec put a draw card into his hand. One thing I want to note too, and for anyone who watched the stream on Thursday, we were a little hard on Larry about some of the decisions he made, specifically with the path to the peak. But clearly he learned because he had the path that he could drop, but recognizing that there's no Lugia V on Alec's bench, there wasn't really a need to put it down at that point. So save the path for when Lugia V actually hits the board, and then just take this time to set up your board. And there are two more Pokemon.
Yeah, I'm a little confused about what happened with those first two Battle Pass. Maybe he was looking to make his Battle Pass after the Judge more alive and a playable card. However, with 4 copies of Cramomatic, I feel as though you almost want to. You're okay with filling up your bench and making Battle Pass a little bit less useful after that Judge as it becomes immediate Cramomatic fodder. Ad- Additionally, I'm not sure if I agree with the Oricorio bench in this matchup, as Oricorio doesn't have as great of value, especially into that Lugia V-Star, because you're going to be looking for 2 prize exchanges each turn as if you're Larry. So I don't think Oricorio is going to have a chance to ramp up damage as much as I'd like.
So actually, I both agree and disagree with your point there. I agree exactly with what you're saying about Larry maybe trying to save those battle passes, though I'm also with you. I don't know if that's the best choice in that scenario. But I think from a perspective of someone playing as Lugia, that Oricorio can be very problematic for math. Because for Lugia, it's really only a 1 card difference, but with 3 powerful colorless energy and a belt, you can knock out a Mew VMAX straight up. If they have the Oricorio down, they need all 4 powerful colorless. And now, I guess, how you're looking at the deck list here, Frank, how many belt does Alec play in his list?
So Alec plays 1 copy of Irida and 2 copies of Choice Belt.
Okay.
Additionally, he does play the 2 Luminion V, so he will have pretty easy access to those Choice Belts, so I can definitely agree with that Oricorio statement. However, he also does not have a very threatening board. So personally, he might have had the 4th Genesect prize, but had he not had a prize, I would have gone for the 4th Genesect, or even potentially a 3rd Mew V in order to try and set up like a board in which you cannot be disrupted by any Marnies of such, even though he does have that Fusion Strike system.
And I think the 3 Mew V is interesting because that's one of the few times that will allow you to Psychic Leap effectively in this matchup, since you need to have a backup attacker available. And if you do Psychic Leap with only 1 Mew or VMAX on the board, there's an opportunity for Alec to boss it up and steal another turn back along with multiple prizes.
Right, yeah. And as we're looking at this turn, if Larry, looking at his hand, he does have, I think, 2 Cross Switcher in there, so it's going to work out pretty well for him if he only has this 1 Lugia V down. However, had he just attacked into this Manaphy and only taken 1 prize, Alec would have had a chance to swing the game back into his favor, at which point he may actually need to end up looking for a Psychic Leap turn because he may not be able to conserve his resources as best as he wishes. But as we see, only 1 Lugia V down, a Cross Switcher, and the tablet. All he needs now is a Mew VMAX, and I already see an Ultra Ball, so it's not going to be looking too good for Alec.
And he does, like you said, he does pull off the Ultra Ball, which right now with the belt on the Mew and the DTE already available, that Ultra Ball gets him the knockout on this Lugia V. And then so the other question for Larry is, we talked about the path to the peak previously. In my mind, there's no sense in putting it down. You don't need to do anything else to disrupt right now. Just set up your board to put yourself in a checkmate situation where next time Alec benches a Lugia V, you boss it up and knock that out as well.
Right, yeah, this game's looking as if Larry is playing to continue to win the game and just not give Alec a chance to come back into the game. And one way to give him back into the game would be a combination of a Marnie from Alec and a path from Larry, which would stop him from drawing any cards and having a pivot to continue attacking with this Mew VMAX.
And I think this is where I love to give credit. I'm a big advocate of self-improvement, looking how you can improve in the game. And the feedback we had talked with Alec about after the match on Thursday was the putting yourself in a position to win and then playing yourself out of the game can be 2 very different things.
Right.
And it looks like Larry, from what we're talking about here, is trying to do an excellent job of not playing himself out of the game. He has the advantage. If the game continues as is, he's going to be in a position to win. So why disrupt or take himself out of that position?
Yeah, exactly. As you saw with the Chromatic Tails, I think right now he might just be looking for an extra energy attachment in case of potentially, there are still a lot of non-live cards in Larry's deck, so there is a high possibility he could just draw 5 unplayable cards off the Fusion Strike system. So I think right now he's just looking for energies, looking for extra modifiers, so that if a Lugia V does come down next turn, he is able to take care of that.
And I think, and I agree, let's stack your hand, let's put yourself in a position where you can make Alec pay if he doesn't disrupt you, since Alec's probably going to want to try to play another Professor's Research, if he has it available, to set up his board. So for Larry, the other thing he really wants to do here is thin his deck of bad cards. And to be fair, it's Mew. Pretty much every card in the deck is a good card. But how do you get rid of the things that don't add value later on down the game? And if I'm in Larry's shoes, I don't think I play any of those Cramomatics. Because I don't know if they add a ton of value right now when it's smarter to just keep them for later. And Larry, please don't put down the path. We talked about this, Larry. All right, we'll see what he gets with the cram here, because I'm curious if maybe he goes for another belt to stack it on the Mew VMAX on the bench while he needs his August. If there's maybe a vacuum he wants to thin his deck further, or what he goes for here.
Yeah, I'm not sure if there really is an ideal grab here. I feel like he's just going for the thinning of the hand to continue to draw cards. He does have one more Genesect, so we could see him dump his hand here, put down that Path to the Peak, then Lost Vacuum with that Quick Ball in his hand to dump his hand down to, I think, 0 and draw 6 more off Fusion Strike system. But I'm in agreement here that we might have been best to hold those Cramomatics, as even if Alec does manage to get a Marnie off and disrupt that hand, Cramomatic is a great card to have in your deck. There's nothing wrong with having access to those Cramomatics. So I would have held them in case off that Marnie you're able to shuffle your deck, but you're unable to draw into a boss or a cross switcher on a Lugia V.
And I think that's something that took me maybe a bit to learn, because you talk about thinning is winning. So you
Right.
always want to thin stuff out of your deck. But the wrinkle is you don't want to thin good cards out of your deck. If you're thinning out outs to plays later in the game that could put you in a winning position, then you're really not, well, putting yourself in a position to win late. So you want to make sure you're prioritizing what you're saving and then getting rid of the correct things. And so we did just talk about not putting down the Path to the Peak. But Larry, you didn't take our advice. But it's still going to put Alec in a bad spot because now he can't Luminion again. He can't use any abilities to try to draw. And if this is why I like having the player cam here. If you look at Alec's expression, he's not having a great time here, Frank.
Yeah, it's not looking too great for Alec. To kind of talk about what you talked about with the Path to the Peak, Larry did grab that Lost Vacuum, and he does play 3 copies in his deck. So maybe it works out for him to put down that Path and Lost Vacuum, knowing that he does have 2 more copies of it in his deck, and his deck does appear to be relatively thin at this point. It's likely at roughly 20 cards, so there's a high chance he could hit it.
Oh, and there's, yep. And that makes a lot of sense, though, to get the vacuum to clear the board. But Larry gets the boss, the tablet, and the Mew VMAX with the energy to take the knockout on the Lugia V. That is going to be the end of the game here. Mew does exactly what Mew needed to do. Run Alec and run Lugia off the board. So any thoughts, Frank, before we move on to the next game of things you saw here that maybe should have gone a little bit differently or plays you did like?
Well, that was a rough game. Obviously, that Ultra Ball for the Luminion on turn 1 is questionable in my opinion. I feel like if Alec knows the objective of Mew to Path and Judge, I think it's in his best interest to get that Lugia V down, and that way with the copies of Pumpkaboo, Quick Ball, Luminion, he has lots of outs to draw out of a Path to the Peak early in the game. So I feel that going for that Lugia and giving him a chance to have a pop-off second turn would have been far more beneficial than going for that very safe Luminion for the research. So that ended up letting Larry essentially go first and just take control of the game.
No, and that makes a lot of sense. It's thinking through not just what's your opponent going to do, but what enables you to complete your game plan. And in that case, putting that Lugia V down probably made him a little more durable to disruption, should it happen.
Right.
All right. So we're going to switch over to our other game here, and we actually have a clash of family here. We have Josh Granning and Parker Granning playing each other in a Regigigas versus Lugia V-Star matchup. And I would like to note the lovely Zigzagoon V-Star marker by Parker on the right here. So, Frank, tell us a little bit about this matchup, because I'm not going to lie, I don't love Regis. I don't love playing against it.
I find this matchup very enjoyable, actually. I feel that the Lugia player has a lot of control over the game, whether it be through Dunsparce and Manaphy, and being able to manage those low 5 bench spots in a combination of Archeops, Manaphy, Dunsparce, your attackers. I think this matchup's really enjoyable as the Lugia player. And as the Regigigas player, you're just looking to attack every turn. You're looking to take advantage of any slow points for the Lugia player, as we do see by the Luminion pass. And again, no Lugia V on turn 1, so it's not looking too great for Lugia in round 1.
So, and this is, I feel like we're kind of repeating ourselves here, unfortunately. It's another time where I'm curious why going for the Luminion here is the correct decision, rather than getting a Lugia V down. And it looks like in Parker's hand, they did have a Serena, so they could have technically drawn cards next turn. And honestly, it looks like we're, not to say punished, but unfortunately that play is kind of getting undone for Parker because Josh has played a Marnie.
Yeah, I'm looking at his discard pile here. I'm trying to see if there's a card under that Archeops, or if that was just discard off the Aurora energy. Because I feel like that might have been the case. I don't see anything underneath.
Oh, correct. That may have been the only play, was to discard that, and the Luminion had to hit the board. So, okay, Parker, I apologize. You probably did the right thing there.
And looking at his hand here, he has the other Lumineon, so if no Path to the Peak comes down, which I don't think so, I think a Regigate just came out, then he will be able to draw cards and get out of this hand. However, his bench is going to be filled with Pokemon that are 2-prize liabilities and that don't one-shot any of the opposing Regis, so that is going to be a little tough for him to get out of. However, those Lumineons can handle the Regielekis, the good Regieleki that hits the bench damage, so maybe he'll be able to clear up some bench space by targeting those down early in the game.
And that always is something that makes me laugh. Can you, when we say the good Regieleki, can you tell me why one is the good Regieleki and one is the bad Regieleki?
So the truth is, both Regielekis are actually very good, in my opinion. The Astral Radiance Regieleki that lets you grab back a trainer card can be very good because sometimes Regis can draw awkward hands. You can draw all your ordinary rods, you can draw into your paths, you can draw into all the good trainers you need early in the game and have to discard them with Professor's Research. I don't know how many games I've won, whether it be online or in person, by using the Badaleki's electromagnetic radar to grab back a card to essentially checkmate my opponent. However, the other Regieleki from Evolving Skies is just as good. That Regieleki hits for 120 damage, meaning with a Choice Belt, it would knock out a Lugia V-Star with no Dunsparce in play, which is very threatening as it forces the Lugia player to have at least the Dunsparce down if they only have one Lugia V in play. Additionally, I don't know how many games that I've used Static Shock to set up random numbers where you're behind or you go first and you just need to put something on the active in order to put it in range. For instance, that Lumineon V, I've Static Shocked a Lumineon V into a Regidrago attack a number of times, and it works out pretty well.
No, that makes sense. And one thing to note with Dunsparce, because that is certainly a key player in this matchup, because Parker now had to bench a second Lumineon and put down Lugia V, which obviously we need, Parker doesn't actually have space to put Dunsparce on the board. So going into the next turn and the next couple turns, until Josh takes a knockout, Lugia is going to be open to that attack from Regieleki, the good one, to knock out the Lugia in one shot and take those quick prizes.
Yeah, I'm looking at this board here. I think Josh has maybe one card in hand or so. So it's looking as though this Lugia will be safe for this turn. So I think ideally next turn for Parker, if they're able to get down those two Archeops and potentially get rid of this Regieleki, they could find a pivot that clears up some bench space. Additionally, this Raikou could also have some merit here as it can target down that Regieleki and set up a potential Statland play if he's not able to draw a Scoop Up net.
And it looks like Josh actually has 2 additional Regieleki in his hand. Did I see that correctly? Looks like Gift Energy. So he is going to get to draw 2 from the Regidrago here, which is good. He did use his retreat for turn, but there we go. So we got a Serena. We can draw some cards. And normally you could say, like, Gust Up the Lugia, but he's not got an attacker right now.
Right, all 3 of those cards in his hand are unplayable, and I see he was debating discarding those Regis. However, I do think you need to just go fast, because if you give this Lugia too much time to set up, then the Lugia is going to be able to hit those good prize trades.
And so here's a question, is Josh going to be able to attack with the Regidrago? And so I see we're discarding. We're quick balling away the capture energy. So we're quick balling away the capture energy to go get, I assume we're going to get a Regis, because we want to make sure we can try to attack, which unfortunately I don't think Josh has Aurora energy in the discard, or 2 at least, to attack with Regidrago, but still, setting up his board, being able to set up an attacker is not a bad turn or end to his turn 2.
Right, I mean, since Parker was unable to get down a Lugia V on their first turn, this actually works out as basically Josh's first turn of the game. Obviously, he had to pitch a couple of Regis, but he is going to be able to Ancient Wisdom and put a Gift Energy on this active Regidrago. So he'll be sitting on a pretty fresh hand, hopefully, going into the next turn, unless Parker is able to get a Boss's Orders on a bench Pokemon.
So this is one thing I think is worth keeping in mind, and we actually saw this in Worlds with Pablo Meza kind of over-stacking some of his special energy on a Regi. Is it really the right decision to put all 3 on the Regidrago here? Because we're not going to be able to attack with it this turn. And if Parker does do something like Gust Up and knock out a Regi that Josh has already discarded, he's going to be in a position where he needs to draw an Aurora energy in order to attack with Regidrago.
Yeah, so since this is the Regidrago and it is probably the ideal Pokemon to put in the active upon getting knocked out. I don't think it's too big of an issue because you'll likely either attack or retreat with it, so it's not too big of a deal. However, this capture energy on the active could prove troublesome if Parker were to go for a boss stall or were to use Raikou and put something in the active that doesn't get knocked out by the amazing shot, because there's only a twin energy in there. So had he kept the capture energy, he could have Josh could have used Ancient Wisdom, attached the capture and the twin to a Pokemon with 3 retreat, and then attached an Aurora to the Regidrago, hopefully off of a draw. So I think that that may prove troublesome. But looking at Parker's hand, it doesn't look like they're going to be able to go for that boss play there. Their hand is clogged. There's not much going on in terms of Lugia V-Star. So
Absolutely. The one upside, though, is because Josh has the good Regieleki on the bench, Parker may be able to snipe it with Raikou to just clear from the board, put some damage on the Regidrago to then maybe use Stoutland to take a knockout if he decides not to discard it here.
yeah, right.
It looks like he does decide to discard,
Yeah.
though, which I can't blame him for that decision. You need to get set up, just hard stop.
I mean, the one thing to note is, had Parker chosen to go for the Serena play and had kept the Stoutland and was able to hit the Lugia V-Star, which again is a long sequence of events that would have to occur, Gift Energy does not activate upon killing that Regieleki. So Josh would be left with what, again, looks like a 1 or 2 card hand, which would likely mean there's probably no Scoop Up Net, there's probably no supporter. So it would look like Parker would have a chance to take 3 to 4 prizes before Josh is even able to get an attack off.
Yeah. Well, it does look like Parker will be able to take a knockout on the Regieleki on the bench. So that's good for him, because at least he's getting a prize here and able to do so without exposing Lugia V-Star to attack. And yep, Parker's able to. Also, taking out the Regieleki with the belt is a big swing, since it, again, prevents an opportunity for a one-shot on the Lugia V-Star.
Yeah, Josh plays 3 copies of Choice Belt, so each one you whittle down is just one less out to one-shotting Lugia V-Star. And in this matchup, it's really important for Lugia to take 2 prize cards, because it's one of the few Pokemon that, without using all of your Aurora energies, can take knockouts on the Regielekis.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. I do think Parker is going to try to use, if not Raikou, to take another knockout on a... That is an interesting attachment right there. We are seeing the speed energy go down on the Registeel. And so, what do you think is the reason for that attachment?
I don't think that there's a... Is that a research, or is it... Oh, it's just 2 Regis, so you got to be thinning down all the cards possible. It draws 2 trekking shoes. So I think Josh is just in the full mode of trying to get out of this hand.
That's fair, that's fair. And so the Registeel, though, is an interesting one. And that's interesting. He doesn't decide to dig further with the trekking shoe and instead goes for the path. And that's why, because he gets a Marnie off the next one. So why bother? Why worry about it?
Yeah, I don't know. With 4, I think there's 4 copies of Path to the Peak. Oh, no, only 3 copies of Path to the Peak. So maybe realizing that those 3 need to stick. But however, since Lugia V-Star has already been activated and both Luminion are on the board, the only Pokemon that Path to the Peak is blocking is that Radiant Charizard. So I'm not sure if I totally think the Path to the Peak is necessary. It might have been better to just look to dig a little bit deeper with those trekking shoes, potentially find that Regieleki or an Aurora energy.
I would tend to agree. And let's see what Josh gets off of the prizes here. Thank you, Josh, for showing us prizes. There's no Regis in there.
There are no Regis in there. It looked like a Quick Ball, an Ordinary Rod, just a couple of niche trainers. Nothing too big of a deal.
The Quick Ball would have been nice at this point to get another Lecky, but like you said, he wouldn't be able to use it anyway.
Right.
And I agree. And he does have a Quick Ball in hand, so we will be able to see a Regieleki. We will be able to see some acceleration by the Regigigas here. And like you said, by attaching the energy to Regidrago before, he's now going to be able to retreat it and then go in with another attacker. And now we're seeing a little bit of a punishment for attaching the speed energy to the Registeel. Because if that speed energy had gone onto the Regidrago, Josh would be able to retreat it into the discard and then slap it on the Regieleki. Now, unfortunately, Josh is going to have to go in and retreat into something else, since we're only going to have a maximum of 4 colorless energy that can be attached to whatever Pokemon he moves to the active. And this is where he's stuck, because Regigigas needs 5 colorless to attack, and everyone else needs 2 colored energy of some capacity. So I'm curious to see what Josh ends up doing here then.
Yeah, I believe that speed energy and the choice spell went down before the Regidrago, so that's how he's able to draw those 2 trekking shoes, which got him out the hand. But I think the speed energy would have been best on the Regigigas. The Regigigas is actually with the twin energy in the discard, the lowest maintenance attacker given the board situation, because it just needs 5 of any energy. Since that
Yes.
twin is there, an attachment plus the twin and 2 other from Ancient Wisdom would get a knockout on that Raikou, and instead, you're going to be Parker's going to be taking a 2-prize swing, getting rid of yet another Regieleki, and the gift energy activation. I was confused where those cards were coming from.
I was also.
But
But
this is going to be a tough comeback for Josh here, as he's down 3 prizes, down a lot of Regis, and combination of Serena and Research and whatnot. So it's going to be a long trek back into the game.
and as a commenter had said in our chat of why benching the Lecky, that was actually exactly the point I was about to bring up. What happened is Josh put down the Regieleki and then went to make a decision on what to accelerate to and how to attack. Just kind of maybe autopiloting a bit of
Yeah.
I'm playing Regigigas. I need all my Regis down. And in that case, like I'm sure the implication is, he opened up his board so that way Parker could take 2 prizes rather than just the one. And so now this is interesting of what is Parker going to sacrifice? And how do you feel about that decision of throwing up the Luminion?
Well, Luminion can get one shot by only at this moment the Registeel, because both good Regieleki are in the discard pile. So I think throwing up this Luminion as something that can pivot and also something that doesn't hold 3 energies on it at the moment works out pretty well, because worst case scenario, if Parker is unable to capitalize on this turn from Josh, then they can just shuffle the Luminion in, promote anything on their board that they believe won't get knocked out. I think this Lugia is actually not in any danger at all. So if this Luminion does need to go back into the deck or needs to get out of the active, I feel Lugia is a pretty good pivot.
And that's a tricky thing too, because the bad Regieleki has 130 HP actually. The good one, having 120, is why Parker's been able to take a couple prizes with Raikou so far. But now, the only thing on Parker's board that can actually knock out this Regieleki is the Lugia V-Star, and then the Archeops with at least 1 powerful energy, modifying the damage. So Josh is not in an amazing position, but by being able to, I assume he's going to targeted bolt and knock out that Raikou on the bench, he's at least going to start to claw himself a little bit more back into this game. And I believe Parker's taken 3 prizes at this point, so Josh does have a couple turns to try to come back, since Parker has multi-prizers on his bench, and Josh, he's going to make Parker take 3 more knockouts to win the game.
Yeah, I'm thinking more about that escape rope play right now, and thinking about that targeted bolt. I think Lugia V-Star was the correct promotion, because you're going to have that bench spot open for the Dunsparce. You don't have to waste and expend an energy for retreating that Luminion. And Lugia V-Star is likely going to take 2 prizes based on Josh's board, and if that Dunsparce does come down. So I think that the Lugia V-Star might have been the correct promotion in terms of mapping out the rest of the game.
I would tend to agree with that, and I think that's a good note of in the moment versus long term. And in the moment, I could see Parker's thought of, I want to protect the Lugia V-Star as my main attacker. But long term, like you said, you only need to take 3 more prizes. If Lugia can take 2 knockouts, or even just 1 knockout, and he puts up an 120 HP Regieleki in the active, then you use your Luminion to attack it, get it off the board, and suddenly Josh still has to find 2 or 3 more knockouts to win the game.
Right. If Parker takes a knockout every turn for the rest of the game, it does not matter if Josh knocks out a 2-prizer in response every turn, because Parker will take all of their prizes before Josh is able to get down to that point. So I think letting that Lugia take some damage is fine, because it's obviously no threat of getting one shot. Your opponent's board still does not have 2 Auroras in the discard pile at the point of the escape rope, so I feel it might have just been best, like I said, to put that Lugia down. But I don't think there's going to be a big punish for it. It's just going to cost 1 energy to retreat it, which is not a big deal, as long as there's energy in Parker's hand.
Agreed. And it looks like Parker did manually attach the powerful energy from hand to the Luminion. And we're going to try throughout all these games and discussions, try to identify some times when we think a play could be either stronger or could go in a different direction. So just so you know, these guys who are watching play are excellent players, and they know what they're doing. And there's probably a reason that they have that we may not see. But we're just going to make sure we call it out for at least the folks watching at home can see why we're doing this. And on that note, in that spirit, I don't love manually attaching to the Luminion prior to accelerating with Archeops. And the reason for that is manual attachment you can't undo, and you are making that attachment only with knowledge of what's in your hand. Once you decide to Primal Turbo, if you're going to do it before the Marnie, you can do that and see your entire deck before making a decision on whether or not you need to Primal Turbo to the active to retreat, or if you need to Primal Turbo both to Lugia, like Parker did there, and manually attach to retreat. And these things, in this instant, clearly didn't matter too much. Totally fine, but there are times when decisions like that can burn you, so it's worth keeping in mind. Making sure to sequence properly is a big deal.
Right, Parker may have had knowledge of the entirety of what's remaining in their deck, what's in the prizes, how many energies they have available. So that might not have been too punishing, but as you mentioned, if you're especially if you're going to Marnie, you have access to more cards off the top of the deck. Maybe you draw an energy. You're more fond of discarding to retreat, because there is a potential where Parker could run out of energies because there are 3 on the Luminion, and you would need to attack with Archeops, and Archeops does not one-shot any Reggie except the good Regieleki without powerful energy, and it needs 2 powerful energy to knock out a Regigigas. So there is a world in which Regigigas could mount a slow but steady comeback, but I'm not thinking that's going to happen if this Lugia V-Star stays for a turn.
And it looks like it will. Oh man, that is 3 energy off the Marnie for Parker. So let's see if he has enough energy in deck to attack with this Archeops. Ooh.
There are enough energy, but that's all the powerful energy remaining, so we couldn't get to this board position I was just mentioning where the Regigigas can mount a comeback because there's 100 damage on that Lugia, which means the Choice Belt Regigigas kills it. Knocks it out. Choice Belt can knock out Luminion. Regigigas knocks out Archeops as is, so there is a potential in which a slow comeback is mounted here.
Agreed. And it looks like I'm pretty sure it should be 130 damage on that Lugia, since V-Guard does not prevent damage from non-Vs. But
Regice only does 100 damage.
Does it only 100?
It only does 100 damage.
Well, that's disappointing. And it looks like Parker is getting a little burned in having to attach both Double Turbo and another powerful to Archeops, but with only 1 prize left to take, Parker's in an excellent position to just close out this game either next turn or the turn after, since Josh still has to take 5 prizes actually.
Well, the interesting thing here is I think Parker has no more energy in their deck, and I don't see a way to put the energies back into the deck. So with a single attachment, this Lugia cannot attack. So if I'm Josh here, the out I'm playing to is that, well, it's not in the active, but I would have thrown up the Regigigas and tried to knock out the Archeops, and then I would have played to try and draw a Serena this turn if there are any left. However, I don't know if a Serena is left to knock out that Lugia V-Star, because if that Lugia V-Star and this active Archeops go down, the only thing on the board that can ever attack is Luminion, but that means Parker has to draw raw boss because there are no more outs to directly search for that boss's orders.
So one thing I will note in Josh's favor in advancing the Registeel is if he is able to put another Regice down, Registeel does 220 base, minus 50 for each retreat cost, and with Archeops only having a 1 retreat cost, Registeel will be able to take the knockout. Unfortunately, that's under the assumption that Josh can get a Regice down on the board. And Clark in the chat, just so you know, we actually have 35, I believe, players
I think it was
today.
37, actually.
37? We have 37 players today. So very excited to get that many people out and pumped about playing Pokemon, because we all love Pokemon. It's a good time.
Yeah, it's a great turnout. Some of our local players are at the Vancouver Regional Championship, so I believe the previous month we had 42 for the turnout, so 37 is still a solid turnout considering there is a regionals this weekend.
Absolutely. And also, you and I are here, which means we're not playing Pokemon today. So
true.
And I am
39 people in the building that
there
play Pokemon.
There you go.
If you want to go that way, that counts.
And I will say, and you obviously are seeing here, Josh and Parker are great players. They've had some excellent, especially Parker's success as a junior and as a senior. So we would love to see you guys out here. We've got a great company here. We've got a great group of people who come play, and yeah, always love to build the community. So with that, Josh does have the research.
Oh, that Serena's down, and the deck is empty.
And that is, well, he does have Ordinary Rod, and that's probably what he was banking on hitting.
Right.
However, and he does get the Ball Search card in order to get the Regice. But at this point, really what Parker needs is an out to just shuffle his hand into the deck.
Yeah.
The one thing, too, if Parker doesn't find that, he does have the option to use Luminion to push itself back into the deck, and then go up and put either his Luminion or Dunsparce or something in the active, and just to be able to take another knockout with either his Archeops or his Lugia during the next turn.
Yeah, the other thing I'm still thinking about the energies left in Parker's deck in order to get those knockouts. I think Josh has 2 turns after this one before Parker can take that final knockout, because if this Lugia gets promoted, it'll just get knocked out. So Parker has to use the remaining 3 energies in order to attach twice and retreat this bench Lugia. However, this all could just be for nothing if there's another energy in Parker's deck. However, I don't think I saw one on the search, so that's the whole game plan here for Josh.
I did not, and that's actually why Parker had to accelerate a double turbo and a powerful, because the only other energy out left was that double turbo.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And so with just that double turbo, Archeops only would have been doing 120, which would not have been enough to knock out the Regis. All right, so it looks like Josh does take the knockout, and Parker makes what I think is the right decision here to advance the Luminion to be able to then shuffle it back into the deck. And like we said, no energy left in the deck right now. Oh, however, with Josh taking 3 prizes, we're actually only 1 knockout and a stadium bounce away from Parker being able to use Charizard.
That is true. However, I think that the Charizard turn and the Lugia turn fall on the same clock, because Parker could just leave this Luminion active, and if it dies, it doesn't mean Parker loses the game, and it allows Parker to safely attach this bench. I think I would have attached the Lugia, because there is a world in which if there was boss, however, Parker probably knows what Josh's list is and knows there may not be a boss's orders in there, which there isn't. So this Charizard is safe on the bench. However, I feel the safest play, not knowing lists, would have been to attach that Lugia, so you have 2 attackers that could close out this game for that final prize.
Well, actually, I both agree. I agree with what you're saying of making sure you have multiple attackers, and I think that's what Parker's doing here. Parker is saying, Josh, Dad, you have the option of either knocking out my Charizard, and assuming that I have a path bounce, or you have a choice of knocking out Lugia, assuming I don't have a path bounce. And with the Lost Vacuum in Parker's hand, he's got to set himself up in the position where he's going to be able to take a knockout in either way, as long as Josh doesn't disrupt his hand. And with the size of Josh's hand right now, plus the 2 Pokemon Rod into the deck, there's not a lot of shuffling that he's going to be able to do. And yes, Parker does have a single prize left at this point. And it looks like Josh has 3 remaining, if I've been counting correctly.
Right. So Josh can go down to 2. There's actually a funny potential for a deck out, actually. Actually, no, there isn't, because Josh could just take 2 knockouts here if Parker were to pass. But obviously, that's probably not going to happen, considering there's that Radiant Charizard on the bench and the Lost Vacuum in the hand.
So using that Scoop Up Net, I think I see what Josh is trying to do here. He's trying to snipe with Regieleki, knock out the Dunsparce, and then set up a knockout. Josh, you cannot attach a Choice Belt from the discard. That would be great if you could. But he's going to use this to knock out the Dunsparce and try to just set up some damage on the board, so that way he can prevent or try to take his last 3 prizes all in one go during the next turn.
Right, but as we mentioned before, that Lost Vacuum in the hand. Oh, maybe I didn't see the Lost Vacuum correctly.
And Parker does win at this point, just because he's able to Primal Turbo out multiple energy to take the knockout on the Regieleki. And I believe that is going to be game. Yep, there we go. That's a game. So that was, honestly, that was a very interesting game. As far as ahead as Parker got during the initial start of that, Josh was in a position to still win, barring just including some poor draws from Parker.
Yeah, there was definitely a possibility for Josh to claw back into that one. I think had he gotten able to get an attack off a turn earlier, that game is neck and neck, and it comes down to the conservation of resources. So that was a good game.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all very much for chiming in on the... We'll definitely be coming back in just a little bit, but before we take a quick break, did want to note that this is obviously our March 1K, but coming up in April, we have our April 1K. So as we mentioned online, our $1,000 cash prize is always guaranteed whenever someone comes in to play a tournament. So whether we have 5 people, 20 people, we're always going to have $1,000 as a full prize. So we'd love to see you out here April 29th. Like we said, it's a great place to play. Some great people here. And then you don't even have to listen to me if you're here playing. So we'll give you guys a quick break and come back for the next round. Thanks all. Welcome back, everybody. We have another exciting matchup here. We have Jeremy Gamilla playing Elijah with a Lugia versus Regigigas matchup. So we talked about it a little bit when we had the family battle during the last round, but Frank, with Jeremy going first and starting Lugia, what do you think he's trying to do here?
Well, this is obviously a far better start than what Parker was having going first. Ideally on this turn, Jeremy's going to be looking to check his prizes, as he seems to be doing right now, just making sure he has access to the Lugia V-Star, as there's only 2 copies of Lugia V-Star in his deck. So, worst case scenario, he could have prized 2 of them, but it seems that everything looks okay, judging by facial expressions at least. I didn't get a great look. But this turn, ideally, just protecting yourself from a potential turn 1 Regieleki attack, looking to make sure you're ready for the next turn is all Jeremy can really do.
So how likely is it to get that turn 1 Regieleki attack if you're the Regis player?
Well, the most popular build of Regis with the Path to the Peak, as Elijah is playing, is not terribly likely to hit that turn 1 attack. It's more likely to go for a Path and Marnie play that seems more consistent. If Elijah were playing the Battle Pass version that had a little bit of popularity at the Orlando Regional Championships, I would say it's totally possible. However, since he's not playing that variant, it seems like this Lugia is going to be safe. But better be safe rather than sorry.
And that's a fair point. It looks like he is going for the Oranguru first, though, so we're curious what else he has then. He has the Lugia V-Star, he has the belt, so that, I could see the logic here. If we're going to use Oranguru to put the Lugia V-Star directly on top of the deck, or it could be the Raikou. That's interesting. Oh, but we see a professor's research. So why do you think you put the Raikou on the top deck rather than Lugia?
You know, I don't have a good reason for that personally. Maybe Jeremy's trying to play into the thought that if that Regieleki comes down, it's a guaranteed prize. However, I think the V-Star, or if there was an out for a supporter, obviously top deck the supporter off the Primate Wisdom, I think it would have been better to put that Lugia V-Star on top, as I'm not sure Raikou has a ton of value at the moment.
And Raikou is definitely valuable in general, as you saw with Parker being able to snipe the Regieleki on the bench. But I agree, it almost seems if you're going to protect yourself from Marnie, why not guarantee yourself the V-Star next turn? Regardless, we did see a professor's research in Elijah's hand, so it's likely we're going to see a research rather than a Marnie, though we will see the Path to the Peak if I saw Elijah's hand correctly. So kind of walking through that plan, assuming Elijah does not end up high rolling a bit and hitting that Regieleki attack turn 1, we're going to see a research, a path, and then what is Elijah hoping to get set up for the next turn?
I think best case scenario would be getting all 5 Regis on the board. Using Regigate on that active Regice would be a good play too. I don't think he's looking for too much. There was a Marnie in that hand to make note of, and a path.
There was, and that's interesting. So I think there's always a choice and a balance of setting up your board versus trying to disrupt your opponent. Maybe Elijah was thinking he could go hard and get that Regieleki attack, and oh boy, it
looks like
that's not out of the realm of possibility right now.
Oh, certainly not. Another thing to note when that research versus Marnie debate is Elijah did just see Jeremy use Primate Wisdom.
Yes.
So since he does not have the knowledge we do, he's assuming that in the top 4 plus the draw for turn, Jeremy will have outs to draw out of this path and Marnie combo. So it is definitely safer to go for that research and far less punishing.
And maybe that was the big brain play, is to Oranguru to make him think you're putting the V-Star on the top deck. It doesn't make sense. He would have drawn it anyway. But still, I'm going to try to help him out a bit here.
There's this one copy of Energy Lotto. It's actually pretty nice here because I do not think there was a second Aurora Energy in the discard. And now after getting that, this Ultra Ball can discard 2 Aurora Energy, and we're looking at a turn 1 Reggie attack.
We may see it. I think I'm not seeing another ball search out
There's missing one
in his hand. But, oof, to be one quick ball away from maybe ending Jeremy's game real early here. Though again, looking at facial expressions, Elijah does not seem pleased with the outcome of this hand, although Jeremy, I can actually see his heart rate rising as he plays that Ultra Ball with the Aurora Energy. And knowing Elijah has the Scoop Up Net in hand as well.
Well, yeah, I think Elijah's shaking his head because he realized that this hand has no follow-up to whatever's happening. So this Regidrago, he could play the Regidrago this turn and hopes to hit a Quick Ball or some discard because there is a Capture Energy in his hand that he could discard to attack, or he can save this Regidrago for the following turn. I think he should save it for the following turn as with the 4-card hand plus the Primate Wisdom on top. I don't think that this Regidrago is in danger, but I guess I'm wrong, and he hit the attack. So
we did hit the Quick Ball, so we can go get the Regigigas. We would not be able to take the knockout on the Lugia, but to be honest, if you can 2-shot the Lugia with a path down, I don't see the downside here.
Right. But I'm beginning to wonder, because Elijah is shaking his head, Oh, never mind. I thought he was shaking his head because he had no Regigigas in his deck, because I would have slammed the quick ball as soon as I drew it, but I guess he was just being a little bit more methodical than I was.
I could see his frustration being that he was one additional switching out away from knocking out the Lugia.
Oh, right, because I forgot, because I thought that I keep thinking the Dunsparce is that bench Pokemon as opposed to that Oranguru.
Did we just see a pass?
That's interesting.
Did Elijah just pass on the attack?
I'm a little confused with that one, because if that Dunsparce comes down this turn, then he cannot one-shot that Lugia.
And I'm also just curious in general of what's the downside of hitting into Lugia with the Regidrago?
I don't think there is a downside, especially because Elijah just discarded that gift energy. So at least, even if there was no attack, it would have been nice to at least put down that gift energy, as I don't think there is a follow-up in Elijah's hand, so I'm a little confused by that decision. Maybe it was a lapse of judgment or just forgetting, but I'm not very sure.
Maybe it's the frustration from not getting that Regieleki attack. And Arctic, Nerd Rage Gaming is located in Buffalo Grove, Illinois, so about 30 minutes northwest of Chicago. Super easy to get to off the main highway, so would love to have you out here. And so it looks like Jeremy is going to play the research. We still only have one Archeops in the discard, but with that Ultra Ball and Evolution Incense in that draw, we're going to see the second Archeops come down here.
On top of that, it was a high-five research, bringing back the tradition from pre-COVID times of high-fiving before Sycamore. I remember those days.
Listen, I love a clean hand Sycamore. You should always celebrate that.
It's very satisfying.
Did we see a high five?
There was a high five on
excellent.
the screen.
I also just love the sportsmanship there of, man, we're playing a game with colorful monsters. If we can't have fun with each other, what are we even doing?
Exactly. On top of that, I mean, pretty decent spirits winning round one. I know if I didn't win round one, I would not be in the greatest of spirits, but obviously these two people here, even maybe Elijah hasn't realized his judgment yet, or even if he has, still being a good sport about it is definitely what you like to see.
And I definitely appreciate that. Also, Elijah is going to have an opportunity to stream Regieleki shots here if possible, and he could do that to knock out the Lugia and knock out the Dunsparce, or knock out the... Actually, he could take 4 prizes in these next 2 attacks.
That is very true. With no Manaphy on the board, I don't think Elijah is actually going to be punished terribly hard for this Regieleki, as a 4-prize swing will happen over the 2 or 3 turns, which will put them on an even prize race. So I think Elijah might actually be not in a terrible position here.
Absolutely. And it's got to be a point of frustration for Jeremy, because does Jeremy play Manaphy?
I think he does. I think he's playing a very similar list to the one that Reagan Retzloff played at the Oceania International Championships, just looking at the similarities, as it's also a deck I was playing, and the counts look very similar to the list I've been playing. The only difference is he's playing 1 Canceling Clone and 1 Irida, neither of which are going to prove terribly useful in this matchup. However, I can definitely see the need for Irida and Canceling Clone, as NRG has been known to have a fair bit of Arceus Duraludon players.
We actually talked about this during the last stream, and we, in fact, did not have a single Arceus Duraludon player during the last local.
That's insane.
We are defeating our reputation here a bit.
If anything, I believe that's a good thing, as it's not as if Arceus Duraludon is the most praised deck, to be quite honest.
You're not going to get an argument from me there, Frank. Absolutely. So this is also an interesting decision. Elijah is putting up the... Oh, man. We just see a Regigate from Elijah.
That was a capture energy for the
it was a capture energy.
Right,
okay.
Right.
Excellent. I got a little stress for him there.
That being said, why not promote the Regieleki?
I am also a little curious about that.
I mean, Blizzard Bind is a great attack here. However, this gives Jeremy a perfect excuse to retreat, attack with an Archeops, and clear out a bench space to avoid that 4-prize turn.
Agreed. And especially knowing that you can put the gift energy onto the Regieleki, I'm a little confused by this. And I wonder what... And I say this as I know what we think the game plan is to go through this, but then I wonder what Elijah's game plan is. Is he thinking that he wants to set up for a larger swing turn? Is he trying to just buy himself a little bit of time to build up his hand? What do you think the plan is here?
Well, I'm looking at Elijah's list. Elijah does play 2 Serena and a Boss's Order, so there is ways to bring up benched V and non-V Pokemon alike. So maybe his plan is just to... Maybe he can not get punished for this play by using a Serena or a Boss to bring this Lugia back into the active. If he does bring this Lugia into the active and swings at it with that Regieleki, it would have 30 HP remaining, meaning it is also in range of the Terra Spark on
Ah,
the bench. So a 3 to 4 price turn is still in the cards for Elijah.
that's a very fair point. I will say, I think I would have liked to see him go in with the Regieleki Terra Spark to then two shot the Dunsparce and Manaphy on the bench just to take those 4 prizes and 2 attacks. But Gem may need to just retreat and get out of the Lugia and go in with an Archeops. In which case, Elijah gets to draw up to 7. He gets to take a knockout with the Regieleki on an Archeops, continue to snipe. Or that's a lie, because Dunsparce is in play. He would just be setting up the Archeops if he chooses to go in with Regieleki.
Right, yeah. Looking at Jeremy's Primal Turbos, there was, I believe, 2 Powerfuls and a double turbo coming onto the
Yes.
Archeops, so it's still a knockout. Maybe he doesn't have access to another energy he'd like to attach other than the double turbo.
Which is interesting. On the bright side for Elijah, all of that energy getting committed to the Archeops means he's going to be able to clear out a lot of resources with a knockout here. And Elijah is going to be able to take a knockout either with Regidrago, Registeel, or Regigigas should he desire. But I'm curious which one he decides to go in with.
Right, so I'm currently looking at the gift energy hand, and he drew the boss's orders. So yet again, that was and a Regis, so that is yet another turn where the Terra Spark could have been live. Additionally, one thing I think we've overlooked is maybe the absence of some Regis. Maybe that's why these plays have been occurring. He's trying to play around the fact that he only has access to one particular Regi.
Ah, it could be fair.
However, I did just again see another Regieleki in his hand, so I'm just trying to figure out what the line he sees is here. Is it going to be to kill this Archeops, conserve his bosses to one-shot threats, and to just play a tradey game instead of a big swing?
And to Elijah's credit, Jeb still has to take 4 knockouts. And with 2 of those powerful energy being placed on the, being placed on the Archeops, there's not really going to be any opportunity for shenanigans with Statland or anything like that. So we're going to have to see Jeremy attack 4 times. And then the question for Elijah is, can he take 5 prizes with 4 more attacks? And just as a quick note, Elijah actually has 5 prizes remaining. I know we have 4 up there, but we'll get that updated shortly. So Jeremy's going into his deck here with that search from Primal Turbo, and I believe going on to the Charizard just to make sure that he has a follow-up attacker if this Lugia goes down.
Right. One thing to note is with the absence of the Pumpkaboo, or not the absence rather, but the fact that it's already been used, and Gem only plays 1 Lost Vacuum, there is only 1 more out to bumping that path to the peak, aside from the Tempest Dive, which will likely come down this turn. But after this path to the peak, Elijah's out, so this Charizard will be live for the late game and potentially for the rest of the game if Jeremy chooses to accelerate more energies to it.
Well, one thing to note too, because Lugia had retreated 2 energy off of it, Jeremy does need to attach a double turbo this turn in order to be able to attack with the Lugia, since he used his lone Primal Turbo to put 2 energy onto the Charizard. I'm assuming he has that in hand.
I hope so.
It does mean that he's starting to run out of resources, though.
Yeah, that's true. Whoa.
Wait a second. We're going to take a quick hold here real quick. Just check on that. Can we just check real quick if Jeremy has all the energy necessary attached to that Lugia? Because I'm seeing a belt and then 2 single colorless. Well, we're just going to see what he says. Looks like we're having that discussion. And it looks like
the realization.
For those watching, this is why you have Frank and I on here, because we're not going to let that slide by here.
I'm sure that was just a total lapse of forgetting from the previous turn. Should be a quick resolution, hopefully. I mean, he did see that prize card, so that might end up resulting, unfortunately, in a double prize loss. But if it hasn't fitted with his hand and both players can't confirm it, I'm sure that we will be looking to resolve that with a less harsh punishment.
Absolutely. And really the question is just going to be, does Jeremy have the double turbo in hand? Because if he has the double turbo in hand, it's as simple as slapping that down and taking the knockout from an actual game position standpoint. So we'll see what Greg says here. As a note, our judge here for the day is Gregory Smith, excellent judge who's done a ton of regionals, been here locally with us for a while, so we can be very confident whatever he rules will be correct and also reasonable, because he tries very hard not to put anyone in a bad position just for the sake of doing so.
Right, these are local events. We're trying to bring people together, not to start fights over small mishaps. So I'm sure Greg's, like you said, going to try and resolve this in the least punishing way possible. I mean, there is another thing to consider of Jeremy could have just used the Archeops on the Lugia. However, searching your deck, shuffling, attaching, completing all these different actions, it's going to be very difficult to just say, oh yeah, I'll attach them here instead.
Absolutely. And from Jeremy's decision to accelerate 2 energy onto this Charizard, it seems clear that his intent was that he had the energy already on Lugia to attack. So, like I said, if he has a double turbo in hand, this is a super easy resolution. If he does not, unfortunately for Jeremy, it's going to be a pass. And it looks like that is what happens, that he does not have the double turbo in hand. So we do see the pass over to Elijah.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see if that was a double prize loss. I'm assuming it's not, as considering the resolution was just put the prize back and pass. So going into this turn, Elijah got a free boss's orders,
Basically.
which is pretty nice.
Yeah. And so we do see Elijah get the belt to take the knockout on the Lugia with the Regidrago. And so here's another tricky part. Because Lugia did not discard the path to the peak, Radiant Charizard doesn't have its ability.
That is true. However, this Charizard could easily get powered up through the combination of an Archeops and an attachment, but that is an extreme allocation of resources for an attacker that's supposed to be very efficient.
And with Jeremy having to go down only to 3 prizes here if he takes this knockout, we're starting to run low on resources.
That is very true. It's looking like a Lugia V-Star is going to be needed in order to tank an attack and take 2 more prize cards, but then you're still left at 1 prize card. So it's going to be very interesting to see how Jeremy's able to take that final prize card. And if I'm Elijah here, I'm just looking to make sure I have quick access.
Is that a quick ball
Yes,
of the
that's a quick-
Irida?
yeah, that's a
Excellent.
quick ball.
Okay. I thought we were going to have another interesting situation here. But no, to your point, we need to make sure, and Jeremy needs to make sure, he has enough energy to power up the next Lugia. And for Elijah, this is one advantage of Regis, and this is an advantage single prize decks have in general, is that they try to run their multi-prize, big boom boom attacking decks out of resources as they have to grind through 6 knockouts. And so Regis is also a little tricky with that, because you look at past single prize decks like Night March, Mad Party, maybe not the best example, but other decks that try to do that, they typically have very low HP and just rely on trading up, knowing that they're going to get knocked out. But for Regigigas, he's got a good bit of health.
Right. If Jeremy was able to recycle Luminions here and chain Luminion attacks, it would be great. As you mentioned, if there were low HP Pokemon, Luminion would be a fantastic attacker here. However, 130 HP is not within the range of Luminion's attacks, so that's not a possible thing here. And I'm trying to remember the amount of energies that Jeremy has used thus far. I think it was at least 7 or 8 energy cards. So he's going to be looking to have maybe 7 or 8 remaining, depending on the amount. Let me check really quick.
Well, so we've seen 4 come down the Lugia to attack. We saw 3 energy on the Archeops that went down, 2 powerful and a double turbo. We have the 1 energy attached to the Archeops on the bench, and we are now seeing 2 Aurora energy come down on the Charizard in order to attack here. But Jeremy will still need the single attachment from hand in order to make this happen.
Right, yeah. Looking at Jeremy's deck, he does have 16 energies, so I think he's running into roughly 4 after this Charizard attack, which is enough to finish out the game if a Lugia can stick for more than 2 turns.
And so this is interesting. It looks like he does have a draw supporter in hand. I believe that's a Marnie. And so what Jeremy may have tried to do is to accelerate out of the deck, that Primal Turbo, and then try to draw in to draw another energy. And this is always a question when we're talking about sequencing. With pulling those 2 energy out, he does reduce his outs to draw into an attachment. But unfortunately, if he doesn't, then he can't play the game. And then the risk is, if he draws into too many, then he can't play the game.
Right. One thing I think to make note of that I think Jeremy may have forgotten about, or maybe that's a coin on top of the Oranguru. I was going to say he may have had access to Primate Wisdom.
He actually did Primate Wisdom that turn and pulled a card that unfortunately was not an energy card off the top of the deck. And it looks like we do just see a pass from Jeremy. And we are going to see a boss of the Lugia V, but this is not a knockout with the Regidrago.
Right, but there is no Manaphy in play, so
true.
That's very okay. Even if he gets sent to the bench, that Regilucky can end up cleaning it up. If it gets evolved, he can still clean it up with one of those copies of Boss or Serena.
And that's a very good point. And especially with by hitting into the Lugia, he does not open up a bench spot for Jeremy.
Exactly.
So all he needs is a second boss. And I believe, did he use a boss or a Serena there?
It was a Serena. He plays
Excellent.
2 copies of Serena, 1 copy of Boss. I know the Boss is actually it was in his hand prior to the Marnie, so that Boss is on the bottom of the deck and will need to get shuffled around if he wants to draw it again.
But on the bright side, if Jeremy does take a knockout here, he's going to have to activate the gift energy to fill Elijah's hand. And it looks like we did still have 2 powerful in the deck, but where are those going to go? Because if they go on the Lugia, he would have to retreat it and bounce the path in order to be able to attack here. And if he discards those, I don't know what else he's going to attack with.
Yeah, I think since that slight hiccup with the Lugia attachment, Jeremy's been running thinner and thinner on resources. That Tempest dive, what is crucial because it was going to get rid of that path to the peak. It was going to conserve another 2 or 3 energies for Jeremy. Another thing to note is on the previous turn, when Jeremy quickballed, he discarded his Irida, which to me signals that he does not have his copy of Lost Vacuum available to him, whether it be discarded and we didn't notice, or on the prize cards, because that Lost Vacuum also would have been the same as a Tempest Dive, and that it would have allowed that Charizard to attack.
Agreed. And I do like this decision by Jeremy to pull the Lugia V-Star out of the deck. It has the same retreat cost as the V, and it prevents exactly the play we were talking about of a boss and then snipe with the Regieleki. The other thing to consider here is we still have those 2, maybe cheap is the wrong word, but cheap prizes on the bench with the Pumpkaboo and the Dunsparce. So we see a boss from Jeremy to try to stall and put that Regis in the active till he can accelerate more energy. Ooh,
Yeah.
but we have the escape rope.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a possibility to stall out the game a little bit, because I don't think Elijah has any energies in the discard because he's been Ancient Wisdoming regularly. But obviously that copy of Escape Rope is just going to nullify this boss.
So we do see the Regieleki go into the active, which looks like Elijah does have a speed energy in hand, which he'll be able to attach. And I don't mind this because you can also ping additional damage on the Dunsparce, on the Lugia V-Star, and continue to draw to try to find that boss's orders.
Right, and I think now is an okay time to clear out that bench spot because a single of Serena, Boss, or just in terms of prize racing, I don't think Elijah minds if he's no longer able to do a big prize turn.
Agreed. Because with only 2 prizes remaining, he just needs the Gust.
Exactly.
So, and I will note, though, the way Elijah has gone about this game has worked and has been effective. Jeremy, unfortunately, not to say mismanaging, but kind of missing where he needed to put his resources that turn is really the big swing here.
Yeah, I think it was just a tiny little slip up, just like forgetting the actions of the previous turn. Had he attached his energies, I think this game would have been a lot closer. Jeremy would have likely been at 2 prize cards going into a 1 prize card turn. He gives Elijah a 1 or 2 turn clock as opposed to a 3 or 4 turn clock to close out the game.
Absolutely. The advantage for Jeremy here is that he does get to go into his Charizard, and he did not lose the 2 powerful energy that are on his Lugia on the bench. And we actually see the Lost Vacuum. So there we go. We are going to get to see an attack with Charizard with just the energy attached, and it looks like we're going to be able to put an energy on the Lugia V-Star on the bench too to attack with.
Yeah, this makes me even more intrigued by the discard of that Irida, because that would have been a very quick and easy way to get access to that Lost Vacuum.
Agreed, completely. And it looks like with the Oranguru, we're putting that Aurora energy back on top of the deck to be able to be Primal Turmoed out onto the board. And I assume that's going to go on the Lugia V-Star.
Yeah, the Lugia V-Star is going to be the only Pokemon that can attack. I think Jeremy's running very, very low on energies. So I think he's going to need to use every energy left on that Lugia, put all the eggs in that basket, and hope that can somehow pull it out. However, I think in terms of just trying to predict the future turns, this Regieleki will go down. The Regidrago will take a return knockout on the Charizard, and then all that Elijah needs to find is a Regieleki and a Regidrago to fill those bench spots, assuming that both those get knocked out.
Well, actually, I'm curious if Elijah's going to catch this because Regidrago is not taking a knockout on the active right now.
Oh, right, with that Heat Fire energy.
Exactly. So, but it's possible that we do see the retreat in order to put the gift energy on the board. We are going to see the Regidrago. And there is the Serena.
So that should be the game if he...
And that should be game right there. All right, we do see the boss or the Gust up. That is going to close it out for Elijah to take the win over Jeremy. And like we said, that was a very close game. both a good start on both ends, maybe some decisions that players could look back on and say, what was I trying to do there? But well played all around, and just resources were the big thing that made the difference. All right. So we're going to talk quickly about this weekly ad, as we say, because we have a lot of events every week. So obviously, we're here to talk about Pokemon. And every Thursday, 6:30 p.m., we have our locals. Typically, we run a tournament, and we have anywhere up to like 18, 20. We've had 22 or 23 people here at one time. It's an awesome community. Everyone's really friendly. We all want to help each other grow, try new stuff, and get better. So would love to see you out. And if you're a fan of Magic, Digimon, One Piece, we have all of those events going on all week. So always feel free to reach out and see if there's an event that's a good fit for you. So we're going to take a quick break before we get the next round set up, and look forward to talk to you in a minute. Welcome back, everybody, to round 3 of 6. And we have a new matchup today. We are looking at Goodra. Goodra. Love Goodra. We're watching Goodra play RC. Wait, I may have put the wrong deck up there. We're watching Goodra play Mew VMAX because I don't know how to read. So, Frank, while I remember how to read, can you tell the class what that matchup looks like?
I actually played this matchup at the Orlando Regional Championships. I was playing Goodra, and I was not on the winning end, unfortunately. However, looking at the list, I think the matchup I had was a little bit different. I don't think Christian is playing the 1-1 Aerodactyl, which was very troublesome for me when I played this matchup. So it's going to be a lot more interesting because Joe will have access to Rolling Iron and the Moisture Star V-Star. So Christian is going to have to allocate his resources near perfectly in order to knock out these Goodras.
I will say the V-Star attack for Goodra is the single most uncomfortable attack name or ability name I've ever had to read in my life.
Yeah, Moisture Star, it's an interesting one for sure.
Yes. So kind of for what you're saying, Christian's going to have to maximize his resources because Goodra essentially has 350 HP when it's in the active after using its attack. Oh, and Joe would have loved a basic Pokemon with that hand.
Yeah, his eyes were lighting up until there was no basic.
Yes.
It was a flash of disappointment.
A Colress, multiple Battle Pass. What more does a man need?
Would have been fantastic.
Yes. And so for Goodra, Goodra is using the Lost Zone engine here, I believe. And so that's really going to be reliant on cycling Comfies, getting his board set up, and then he wants to get to that magic number 7 as soon as possible to use his Mirage Gate.
Right.
And so, Frank, when you said you had a little, maybe a challenging round with Goodra versus Mew, what really went wrong there?
So the two things that went wrong, especially in that, was my opponent that I played against was also working with Grant Hayes, who top-aided the Orlando Regional Championships with the Aerodactyl V-Star, and the interesting Leafy Camo Poncho card. I don't know if I'm ordering those words correctly, but all three of those words are on the card. And that was tricky because that Aerodactyl, once it was left the active, I was unable to gust it again because Leafy Poncho, whatever it's called, says that you cannot play trainer cards that affect or supporter cards that affect that Pokemon. So I could never boss it up even if I attacked into it once, which proved very troubling because then my Goodras were essentially easily two-shottable and we could trade two shots and I would just never win because my deck was slower than Mew.
And that's the issue with Goodra is that because you're reliant on Mirage Gate to get your Goodra set up, and they have to be on the bench as kind of dead weight for a little bit, and it can be undone by a gust or rope or something. Goodra is very much a slower, later game. You kind of close with impossible to get through guys. Whereas on the Mew side, Mew's going to win by early aggression. So if Christian's able to gust up and knock out those Goodras before they evolve into V-Star, he's going to be in a much better position because Joe's not going to have a ton of comeback potential per se. He's just going to stretch out the game long enough where Christian has to run out of resources.
Right, I'm looking at lists here because we were talking about the escape rope and boss's order combination. Christian plays 4 copies of Cross Switcher, as well as a copy of Boss and a copy of Serena. So there looks to be at least 2 instances in which he could do that. He could do it twice. However, I think he's only going to really need to do it once, especially if he goes first, which I don't know who's going first, but we'll soon figure that out.
And it looks like Joe is starting the Goodra, which is not ideal, but, we'll push through. And it looks like Joe is starting, and that's a big deal.
That is indeed a big deal. Unfortunately, as you said, starting that Goodra is not ideal, as usually you want to start, obviously, the Comfey or a Cramorant. Something that is scoop-up nettable would be ideal, but he does play 3 copies of Switch and 3 copies of Escape Rope, so it is entirely likely that he opens a switching card in his hand.
And I'm going to just do a non-game analysis note to say, look at how shiny all of those cards are.
Oh, it is beautiful.
They're beautiful. So, as a note on that note, NRG Gaming does sell and buy singles. So, if you have some shiny things you want to buy, we definitely have them. We're looking to sell them. And if you have shiny things you don't want anymore, NerdRage is always buying cards. We have a hot buy list for today where we're trying to get a couple of the upcoming great cards in. So, if you have cards you want to sell, love to take them in here. Anyway, back to the game. Getting that Battle VIP pass for Joe, I also don't know what order those words go in whenever I read it. Getting the 2 Comfey is great, because that's exactly what he needs to start setting up his board. But does he have a Switch in hand?
Right, if he doesn't have a switching card, then that Battle Pass is great. However, he's not going to be able to get to 3 or 4 cards in the Lost Zone. It is important to note, especially with him going first, even if Joe is only able to get to 4 cards in the Lost Zone on his second turn, he does play a copy of Cramorant, which is a nice filler in between, as he could recycle Cramorants on a Genesect at some point in the game, because he does play 3 copies of Boss. He could use a Cramorant to soften up a Mew early in the game. So Cramorant definitely will have some value here, but I think the first most important part is to get those Comfeys in the active.
It looks like it is a pass over after that. That Escape Rope, if he had had it, could have also been a big deal because Christian did bench the Genesect. But it looks like Christian has a couple draw supporters in hand, which is good. So he'll be able to continue to play the game and hopefully draw into some of those battle passes. So if you're going to judge or Marnie, what do you think you do in Christian's position here?
Well, considering my opponent did not play a switching card, I'm probably looking to Marnie as, 1, I see more cards, and 2, mainly just seeing more cards. Now that I think about it, the judge would be kind of neat because it could put the non-switching cards back into his hand potentially. However, I don't think that that's something you really need to be doing. I think you need to be looking to set up your board. Seeing 1 more card as an extra battle pass, an extra Ultra Ball as you see here, extra discard card, which is very important.
And I would agree with that assessment because really Christian needs a setup. Joe had kind of a slow setup. He wasn't able to get to a point where he's going to be able to Mirage Gate turn 2. So Christian's got to know that if he's able to get ready to take a boss KO on his next turn, he may be able to run away with this game. But the tricky thing is he's going to have to make sure that he manages resources effectively, like you said. Saving those power tablets, saving those choice belts, making sure that he doesn't get rid of anything that'll be valuable later.
Right. All it takes for Joe is 1 Goodra that sticks for long enough and is able to use Moisture Star to turn this game on its head. So as you mentioned, those resources are going to be very important. Additionally, I think it's important to note that Christian is already going to be down 1 of his supporter gust options in that Serena as he discarded it off of Ultra Ball, which means that now there is only 1 chance in the game to do a cross switcher, boss's orders, or gust sort of play, unless a combination of Pal Pad if it's in the list, which I don't think so.
And I don't see a Silene either. So that's going to be everything he discards, it's gone.
Right.
That's what it is. And we see him actually, well, as we know, getting rid of a choice belt and and it looks like a Lost City, which the Lost City is less of a big deal because you don't really want to help out Joe by lost zoning any of his guys.
Right, yeah. I think the choice belt and the Serena discards they're unfortunate and they're not ideal, but as you see, this board is not looking terribly great. With he had to Genesect for 1, 2, maybe 2 cards, had to dump the rest of the hand for this other Genesect. So Christian just needs to see cards, and if that's at the expense of a choice belt, then so be it.
And that is an excellent card to draw in the 4 Seal Stone, because Christian's going to go into his deck and assuredly get a Battle VIP pass here.
Yeah, if one had to guess, that'd be the best card. If he's unless he's going to save the 4 Seal Stone, I would just immediately grab that Battle Pass. Now you're going to draw at least 2 to 3 more cards unless he has more expendable cards in his hand.
And I like getting the Oricorio there because Psychic Leap's really not going to be enough in this matchup because it's going to do almost 0 damage to a Goodra. But getting that Oricorio down means that now Joe has to... he's not going to be able to one-shot a Genesect. He's going to be able to one-shot a Mew, but even then, Joe's not going to be doing enough to really make Christian hurt here.
Oricorio is great in this matchup. It definitely gave me a lot of troubles in my experiences in this matchup as that previous play I was talking about where Joe could go for a Cramorant this turn. That Cramorant does 90 damage. As we've already mentioned, Goodra would end up doing 180 damage, which means that Mew can live 2 attacks, which is great.
Absolutely. It looks like Christian actually has double cross switcher in his hand. And that's a big deal because he knows that Joe's going to want to Chorus this turn. He's going to want to make sure he's getting cards in the lost zone. So his hand probably isn't going to be disrupted.
Yeah, looking at Joe's list, Joe actually plays 0 hand disruption, which is not terribly abnormal. I've seen some lists that play Marnie. I've seen some lists that play Roxanne. But Joe has chosen to exclude both of those cards and I guess and substitute with more consistency. One card to note that I'm just now seeing is 1 copy of Big Charm, which makes Goodra have 380 HP in this matchup, which could prove very troublesome again for Christian. Or it could be benched onto a Goodra, potentially if maybe one Goodra gets knocked out and this slow start continues to progress, he could throw that Big Charm down on a Goodra, potentially allowing it to live longer.
And that's a big deal too, especially like you said, with Moisture Star, forcing that 3-hit KO. And so Joe had his first Comfy, his first flower. Is it flower selecting?
Flower selecting.
Flower selecting, and he actually had a choice between a Mirage Gate and a Water Energy. And so here's the question from my end for Joe is, how well did you check your prizes? Because in Lost Zone, prize checking can be a huge, huge deal. If he has 2 Water Energy prized, he can't really get rid of that one. But if he has 2 Mirage Gate prized, can he really get rid of that Mirage Gate? And it's making that choice of trying to see what is a thing I can discard? What is the thing I can give away and never get back? So hopefully the Mirage Gate is an alright one to do so. And I'm guessing if he's using Capture Energy, it's going to get another Comfy.
Right. I could see him getting another Comfy, or I could see him getting that Radiant Greninja and looking to concealed cards away that Water Energy in hopes of building a hand. I also think I saw in his hand his copy of Luminion V, which can be a Colress. So maybe he's just looking to see a wide array of cards this turn in order to set himself up to have a good third turn where he's able to Mirage Gate.
And one of the things with saving that Luminion, and I could see this being the right choice, is that is not the card I was expecting to bench this early.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting to see it this early either. I was expecting it to see that on a potential swing turn into this next turn with the Mew. As we know, Christian's already down both of his choice belt, one being on that Mew V on the bench, one being in the discard. So I was expecting to see it on that Mew with the choice belt, as then Christian's only working with 4 damage modifiers being those power tablets for the rest of the game.
Well, here's a thing, though, that Joe could do. Rather than playing Colress, he could just go for the boss. And he could boss up that Mew V on the bench with the choice belt. And that is what we're going to see. It looks like Joe's going to take the aggressive stance and say, I'm too far behind to really try to Colress and Mirage Gate with how well Christian set up. So let me take that Mew, let me take that choice belt off the board and give my Goodras a chance to tank a little better later. Especially with Christian getting rid of a Lost City early, maybe he can get Drapion back with an Ordinary Rod later.
Yeah, I think that's especially important to note, the loss of that one Lost City, meaning with one Lost City and only those power tablets, it's going to take a fair bit for Christian to knock out this Drapion, as he's going to need the double Turbo Energy, an out to Mew VMAX, a power tablet, and if he wants to bump it, he's going to need a Lost City. So there's going to be a lot going on for Christian this turn, so I do think this Drapion has a high chance of being safe to take another knockout.
And especially with Christian's hand, as you said, Joe didn't play any hand disruption, and Christian's hand includes 2 cross switchers. And Christian's not going to want to burn those, because if he's going to go into a Mew VMAX, he has to knock out that Drapion or put down a path and hope it sticks. Because if it doesn't, then Joe's going to all but end the game right then and there.
Right. One interesting thing to note about this is I could see Christian playing the cross switchers and knocking out a Goodra or that Luminion. Probably the Goodra, as recycling the Luminion would not be ideal for Christian. So I could see him targeting down one of those Goodras and leaving that Drapion for a potential Roxanne Path turn or Roxanne Lost City and trying to stick Joe in a position where, since he only has 1 card in the Lost Zone, he wouldn't be able to attack with any of his Pokemon.
Correct. And I think that's really Joe's decision here, is he chose the route of, let me put Christian on his back foot and say, you can't answer, and I'm going to take a whole lot of knockouts here. And we do see the cross switchers, and this maybe is an opportunity to either take the knockout and put a path down, or just try to stall a couple turns here and hope Joe isn't able to hit the switch or anything with his Lumineon down, bench full, and only one card in the lost zone.
Yeah, I really like this play, actually. I think putting on the path also makes it even harder for Joe to get off that Drapion, so he gives himself 2 windows of opportunity to climb back in this game through a path this turn and then through a Lost City Roxanne play to eliminate that Drapion. Or just,
Or we go straight for the Drapion.
I think he may be in need of burning some cards here, actually. I don't think he has access to a double turbo energy yet, and he needs that very desperately.
Agreed. And I think that was the downside of having the 2 cross switchers in his hand early, is that he had to clear them out.
Right.
And we do see the heads on Cram, and Joe's reaction says it all. Of he's probably saying some very non-professional words in his head as he looks at this situation. On the bright side, unless Christian does put down a Lost City, Joe's going to have the opportunity to go back and recycle that Drapion. Because I
Right.
believe he plays 2 Ordinary Rod.
Correct. Yeah, he plays 2 copies of Ordinary Rod. However, one very interesting thing about the Goodra deck is that it doesn't play Quick Ball or Ultra Ball.
Ah,
The only real way of searching out your basic Pokemon is through Capture Energy and Battle Pass. And in Joe's list, he's only playing 2 Capture Energy. So with one of those, as we know, was what got the Drapion down the first time, he really only has 1 out to that Drapion.
interesting. And so, looking here, Christian declines to put down the path to the peak he seems to have in his hand. What do you think about that decision?
If I had to guess, it's going to be because he doesn't have any way to bump that path to the peak. However, if the path isn't getting bumped, then that likely means that your Mew is not getting damaged. So I feel that maybe if Christian has a switching card in his hand, which I wasn't able to see,
We just got a dead-eye stare from Joe about that flower selecting of the V-Star or the Colress. So he's really having a great time over there.
yeah, I mean, luckily he does play 4 copies of that V-Star, so only being down 1 isn't terribly bad. But then again, he does have to then pick one of these cards off this course, which I think is another V-Star.
It's a V-Star, Raihan, and Boss seem to be the cards he's taking. And it looks like he's lost zoning Comfy and a Battle Pass. That one's not too bad.
Yeah, looking at this hand, though, with those 3 cards, as we know, none of those 3 cards are a Mirage Gate, none of those 3 cards are Scoop Up Net. None of those 3 cards are going to further his board state by a ton, so it's still looking pretty grim for Joe.
Getting down the 2 V-Star is definitely good, though, because it's going to be very challenging for Christian to hit through those. And we do see the Temple of Sinnoh, which, for Christian is probably fine right here, just because he has the path in hand to bounce it.
Right.
So he will be able to do so, and he'll be able to do so after drawing with all of his Genesects.
Yeah, I think Joe's checking with the Cramorant this turn. As you mentioned, that path to the peak can be used after all the Genesects. However, we also know that Christian is down Serena, Boss, and 2 Cross Switcher.
Yes.
So he could be being thrown onto an odd prize turn here. I did see 1 Cross Switcher in his hand, so there is a potential for him to draw the other one. And if he did, that would be very fortunate for him. However, Joe would then have yet another opportunity to throw him onto an odd prize turn and get a chance to ramp up a Goodra.
Well, and the one thing to note here, though, with that Cramorant only hitting for 90 damage, Joe doesn't play any damage modifiers.
Right.
So his max damage output is going to be 200 from Goodra, 180 in this scenario. So he's actually, even with that Cramorant, going to have to 3-shot this Mew VMAX. And I recognize in the situation he's in, with that few cards in the Lost Zone, this is probably his best opportunity to do something, but it's kind of underwhelming to have a turn end like that.
Yeah, it's very underwhelming in terms of you still have to 2-shot your Goodra has to swing twice into the Mew. However, I don't think it's actually that bad. I think just putting the Cramorant up and applying some pressure forces Christian still has to hit a switching card or another combination of Mew VMAX and a double turbo energy. Otherwise, this Cramorant could swing again, in which case that damage is very valuable.
Absolutely. And one thing to note here, with Christian putting down the Lost City to draw more cards, that means Cramorant's going to go in the Lost Zone. And normally you would say, oh, that's bad, like you can't get that card back. It's kind of the ideal scenario for Joe, because Christian goes down to odd prizes. Joe's not going to bench a 3-prize or a VMAX or anything like that. And Christian puts him to 5 cards in the Lost Zone. So Joe's 1 Colress away, 2 Comfies away from getting that Mirage Gate and getting that attack off, whereas it may be a little more challenging without that.
Right, and as we know, in Joe's hand he has Raihan, so depending on the rest of his hand, in addition to these Comfies, there is a possibility for Joe to be able to hit a Scoop Up Net or a way to retreat, in which case then if he gets those 2 in the Lost Zone with those Comfies, Raihan can search out a Mirage Gate.
And unfortunately, that Raihan's going straight back into the deck from that
Right.
judge from Christian. But to be honest, this is what Mew does now. Like,
Mhm.
this is the Mew game plan, is to disrupt, put up a big tanky guy with Oricorio, and say, you're not going to be able to one-shot through me.
Yeah, right off this judge, Christian still does need a Mew and a DTE or a switching card. Unless he's already played one and I just didn't see him switch and retreat.
I have also not seen it, so, maybe we just missed it. The other question I have, and maybe Frank, if you could give some insight on this, does it make sense for Christian to evolve the Mew V?
Well, depending on what's going to happen this turn, I think it does make sense to evolve the Mew V in terms of if you need to thin. However, we do see that DTE, so at this point, Mew VMAX is just another out to attacking, taking this knockout, and putting pressure on Joe. So I do think there is reason to evolve that Mew.
And he chooses to. The other upside is now you will be able to use Max Miracle to knock out that Cramorant, whereas otherwise you would have needed to use Technoblast.
Uh, oh, okay. I was just seeing where the damage was going. I thought he was
Oh,
maybe considering
it
Psychic
did come
Leap
back,
then.
yes.
Right.
And that actually was exactly the downside. If you take the Mew V off the board, you're not going to be able to Psychic Leap. But, as we talked about, Joe's still two-shotting that Mew from this point forward, so Christian probably isn't too worried about it.
Another thing to note is you were talking about that Max Miracle. Obviously, Christian played a power tablet before the judge, so that's already on the
True.
board. However, he also played one after the judge and after he saw the Mew VMAX and Double Turbo in play. So I'm a little interested to see if he's playing for a different strategy of that Luminion is 2 prizes. Maybe he has a copy of Echoing Horn in his list that he's going for. Yes, he does have a copy of Echoing Horn. So maybe his game plan is to...
Interesting. We do see the third power tablet come down.
Yeah, that kind of caught me mid-sentence. I'm intrigued by this play because he's already put down his stadium, so there's not much else he can really do this turn with those power tablets, or there's not really many more cards he needs to draw either. He has everything he needs for this turn to continue applying the appropriate pressure.
And this goes back to exactly what you were talking about at the beginning of this matchup is resources.
Right.
And each of those power tablets is an extremely valuable resource that Christian can't get back. On the bright side, at this point with Christian going down to 3 prizes, Joe's likely going to have to leave a Comfy, Greninja, something like that on the board, and Luminion still on the board. Christian does have an opportunity to still map out his game plan in a way that doesn't involve knocking out a Goodra.
Right. I think Joe's line for this game is very doable now, though. With all those power tablets down and with only access to 2 cross switchers, I think that Joe has a very easy line, as I already said. But it all comes down to what happens off of these flower selectings. If Joe is unable to get any sort of pivoting options, in addition to getting to 7 cards in the lost zone, then he's going to have a lot of trouble getting off a rolling iron attack this turn, which I think is a must.
Agreed. Well, so the other option too here is instead of getting off a rolling iron, he could use Luminion's attack and Aqua Return into a single prizer.
That is true.
And in that scenario, with those 3 power tablets down, you're not really super concerned if Christian is able to boss up a Goodra because you still haven't used your V-Star attack yet, or
Right.
V-Star ability.
I think Joe's flower selecting here is debating between a boss's orders and then another card. I think it's okay to get rid of the boss here because you don't really need to chase down prizes super fast. If Christian is just retreating and passing and leaving damaged Pokemon on the board, I think that's perfectly fine. Your goal in this matchup should be to set up a point where your Goodra cannot die because obviously you know that your opponent likely has one gusting out left and that double cross switcher. Mew lists typically play two gust supporters if they're playing the cross switchers as well.
And that makes sense because at that point you have 4 gusts total, and if you're taking 2 prizes each one, you've got 1 to spare. So Joe looks like he's not able to find a supporter he wants to play as of yet. So we'll see it comes out of his hand. We do have the Mirage Gate, and here is where I'm curious. Do you go into the Goodra? Do you get Luminion off the board?
I think going into the Goodra is very good here because then if that boss's order has to be used to target down that Luminion, then that means there's no gust left for these Comfies. One thing I'm curious about is if that lost on counter is correct of 8, I'm having a little bit of trouble counting if it's 8, then I'm curious as to why Joe used that switch to go into Comfy one more time when he was already in Mirage Gate range because now his Raihan likely needs to go for another switching out to get that Goodra into the active. I think it would have been better to allow that Raihan to grab something a little bit more impactful, potentially a stadium counter to a path or just any other card that can help him to continue to see cards like a Colress.
And it looks like he actually is going to use the Raihan to retreat. So I agree with what you're saying, and it could be he was digging for another card to set up his next turn. Maybe the Big Charm itself.
Yeah, true. He also still had attachment return, which I didn't notice. I just also did not see the energy card in his hand, so looks like that switch was well worth it.
Yes. And so the other thing I think Joe needs to keep in mind, though, speaking of the switching outs, is what happens if Christian tries to stall?
That's true.
Because Christian can, we do see another temple. That could be a big deal. Because now Christian either needs the other energy or another stadium bounce. But I say that. Christian already has 2 Path to the Peak in hand, so he's probably going to be able to handle it.
And going back to what you were talking about with the retreating issue, Goodra does have a whopping 3 retreat cost, I believe. And I think we've already seen at least 1 escape rope in the Lost Zone. I think 2 switches have been played. So you're already looking at half of your switching outs down, and a boss stall is very likely.
It is. The one thing that Christian has going for him, though, is with those Path to the Peak, obviously he also shuts off Moisture V-Star.
Right.
So if he's able to boss up, hit into the Goodra, and Joe can't switch it without a stadium bounce, he also can't actually heal it. So Christian's going to be able to take a clean 2-shot there, have 2 attackers remaining on the board, and then when Joe tries to come in and take a knockout, all Christian has to do is boss or escape rope or something along those lines. Because I believe Christian does still have 2 cross switchers available in addition to the boss, correct?
Right, unless one is prized, then he does have access to both.
And we do see the Path to the Peak come down, and we do see the double cross switcher. Oh, it looks like we're taking the knockout on the Luminion here.
I actually don't think it makes much of a difference what he's taking it out on, since this is, as we know, his last out to Augustine card. However, Joe doesn't know that, so there is a world where you bluff your opponent into, and you try and knock out the Goodra, and then you make them try and Luminion and put up something else, and you get them in a position where they're playing chicken with what they promote off the Luminion. But also, Christian is down 3 power tablet, so maybe just realizing, yeah, I'm not going to draw the knockout on the Goodra. It's best to just target down the Luminion and play for one final Hail Mary play.
That's a fair point. And I'm curious to see then, because I'm just confirming, Christian does have 1 Gust out remaining in the boss, correct? Or has he already gotten rid of that?
He plays 1 copy of Serena and 1 copy of Boss, and he discarded the Serena with an Ultra Ball in the first turn and used the Boss to kill that Drapion.
Oh, that's correct.
So he is out of Gusting cards. One more thing to note, and the one way Christian could climb back into this game is Joe just put down his last Temple of Sinnoh, I believe.
Ah, okay.
So with that 1 remaining path and the fact that Joe cannot take a knockout on the active Mew, there is a high possibility that Christian is able to climb back into this game through a Path Roxanne attack.
And I think that's the tricky thing, is with Joe only having 1 energy on his bench Goodra.
That Temple just went to the discard, by the way. I'm not sure if that was supposed to go there or if he just put it there on accident, but
I'm also not sure. Did we...
Let's get that checked out real quick.
Yeah, we're going to get that checked out right now.
Very important to make note of.
It is. And it could be that Joe played a Lost Vacuum, like you said, where that should have gone to the Lost Zone, but we're going to confirm that real quick here. Oh, looks like... Ooh, well, that is a big deal. Well, if anyone else needs any more evidence that commentators should be able to influence the game and what they see, there it is, guys.
Yeah, that's very important because now Christian, he has to put down the path to even attack next turn.
Correct.
Or he could commit another double turbo to this Mew, in which case he'll be working with 1 double turbo energy for the rest of the game.
And to be fair, with no ability to Psychic Leap or anything like that, and with Joe having at least 1 Duraludon charged up, I don't know how much Christian cares. He's going to still have to force Joe to go through either 2 Mews, 2 Mew VMAXs, or Mew VMAX and an Oricorio, something along those lines.
Yeah, I think this game is going to come down to solely the ability to Moisture Star or not Moisture Star. Because Christian does not have enough firepower left to take a big swing onto this Goodra. So it's just going to be a matter of how many swings is Christian able to get off and whether or not Joe is able to heal it at one point.
Absolutely. And so when we talk a lot about, and there comes a Path to the Peak. And so that's the question. Does Joe have a way to get rid of that? Because if he doesn't, Christian's just going to be able to take a clean 2-shot here. So on that note, do you just max Miracle here?
I think you have to go for the Cross Fusion Strike for Technoblast because with the -80, Max Miracle would only do 30 damage.
So Max Miracle goes through the effects.
Oh, Max Miracle does?
Yes, but to your point, it would be 110 with Max Miracle, or it's going to be 110 with Technoblast.
Right.
But that's one. And do
He's
we?
forgetting about his
I think he
own
is
attack.
forgetting about his own attack. To be fair, if he doesn't bounce the stadium, he doesn't retreat.
But that's important math, though, because Christian can't even two-shot with the remaining resources in his deck, so we need to fix that math, too.
Bryce, do you mind? Thanks, Bryce. Bryce is absolutely crushing it over here. He is helping us out by making sure that everyone playing on stream is doing what they need to do. So if y'all could give a shout out to Bryce.
Exactly.
You see him in here.
Exactly. In the heat of the moment,
He's covering us.
You can always lose track of what's going on, so it's important to have a set of neutral eyes.
Yes, because I believe the actual amount of damage on the Goodra should be 110 damage.
Right, and as we know, with both choice belts gone and 3 power tablets gone, the maximum amount of damage output that can occur next turn is 140 damage, I believe, which means that Goodra is safe, which means Joe does not need a path out for this turn.
And that's kind of the tricky part then. If looking at Christian's list, he doesn't play Escape Rope, he doesn't play anything like that. So he's not going to be able to force Joe out of the active at any point here.
Right. If I'm Joe this turn, I'm looking to set up that other Goodra with the Mirage Gate. I'm not looking to retreat into it necessarily. I'm just looking to set it up because knowing the content of the cards and the amount of bump outs remaining, he does not need to retreat yet.
Correct. And so here's where Christian's in kind of a rough spot. Because this Mew VMAX will get knocked out if he leaves it in the active, he can't do anything tricky like listening droplets or anything like that. He's going to have to either Psychic Leap it or, I don't actually know what else. What is Christian's step here? How does he win this game?
Yeah, he's also looking at, I think there's like 6 or 7 cards left in the deck. Yeah, and he sees the right.
There it is. So Joe able to take an aggressive start to take that Mew and those modifiers off the board, and Christian's not quite able to get there. And unfortunately, if Christian did have those power tablets available, I don't actually know if that would have been the difference with how that game played out.
Right, yeah, I'm thinking that those power tablets may not have proved as useful as I was expecting them to prove. However, there is potential that Joe, if he is not sitting on a water energy in his hand, that game could unfold very quickly, as then when Christian takes the knock on the active Goodra, if the other Goodra doesn't respond, then Christian has a chance to reset the board and get his Goodra his Mew VMAX out of harm's way.
Absolutely, and I think that's what it really came down to, is that Joe mapped out his prizes well, so Christian didn't have the opportunity to go into anything else to buy himself that turn that he needed. So, very interesting game. And we're going to jump into... All right, perfect. So right after this game, we're going to jump into just a quick note here about our next 1K coming up in April. So again, this is our March one. We've got a great turnout here. As you can see, some very interesting games and interesting decks coming against each other. So in April, we're hoping to have the same thing. So we'd love to see you out here for our guaranteed $1,000 cash prize in April. I know we on the team will be here and enjoying ourselves. So yeah, love to see you guys. Hopefully it's some nice weather and we can get you out here. All right, we will be right back in just a couple minutes. Thanks, all.
Hello, everybody. My name is Rafal Gladys, and I'm here with Joe Storino. We are going to give you a caster show match for the Gym Leader Challenge format with Frank, one of your casters on the left, and Dan, your other caster on the right. Dan is playing the GLC Grass deck, and Frank is playing the GLC Water deck. Joe, could you tell them what Gym Leader Challenge is, if anyone's seeing it for the first time?
Yeah, for sure, Rafal. So GLC is a singleton format, very similar to Magic the Gathering's Commander format, where it is singleton mono type, right? So all the Pokemon in Dan's deck are grass type. All the Pokemon in Frank's deck are water. And so, it's still the same 6 prize game. It looks like Dan here's going first, and yeah,
so we see Dan starting off with a Hisuian Heavy Ball, which is already good in the standard format, but particularly good in Gym Leader Challenge because every single card in your deck is a one-of. So if you have any Pokemon in your prizes, Hisuian Heavy Ball is a great card to get it. You can almost always guarantee you find something. You see Dan going first and Frank going second here. both of these decks actually really like going first. You'll have the Sobble on Frank's side, which some of us are very familiar with probably, which some of us might be very familiar with. Which some of us are very familiar with because it's very common in the standard format to play this Sobble to use Keep Calling and get multiple Rapid Strike Pokemon onto your board. Frank does play... I'm lending them my decks, but I believe Frank is playing at least one Rapid Strike Pokemon, so he will be able to find something. He will at least be able to find the Rapid Strike Remoraid, providing it is not prized. While Dan, on the other hand, has a Kricketune active, which has the Bug Hunch attack, which lets it search for 3 Grass-type Pokemon and put it in his hand, which lets Dan get a pretty strong setup once he does it. And it looks like Frank is not able to find the Remoraid, unfortunately.
Yeah, very unfortunate to Frank. I mean, again, the thing about GLC, though, is it's so nice just to be able to look through the deck again, double-check those prizes, because, again, it could be very hard to kind of figure out, exactly what's prize and where everything's at. It's also pretty nice to get the Water Energy on the Sobble. Eventually, that Sobble will turn into a Drizzile and then eventually an Inteleon. Inteleon has a great attack, does 120 and 20 to the bench, so... it does not hurt to get that kind of going, and the Snom still. Looks like Dan here played a Cynthia.
Yeah, almost drew 7 cards, but we caught it just in time.
Yo,
Perfect.
that's what we're talking about, guys. Here we go. Dan benching the Roserade. Roselia, excuse me. Raph, what does that evolve to?
So the Roselia, as Joe mentioned, evolves into Roserade, which is one of the most powerful cards in Dan's deck. While Frank does get to use Shady Dealings, which we're all very familiar with, the Roserade has the La Parfume ability, which, when it evolves, lets him search for 1 of any card. So it can be incredibly helpful. It can help him just find himself a rare candy, find himself an evolution Pokemon, find himself an energy. It's really nice to get out of sticky situations because you can just level ball for it, evolve to Roserade, you get pretty much anything you want. So it's a pretty good card.
Yeah, definitely pretty good. And it looks like Dan is going to use that Kricketune attack, finding 3 grass Pokemon. And there we have it.
There's the Roserade.
There it is. It's coming next turn, hopefully, unless Frank can maybe, disrupt Dan's hand. Again, Frank has that opportunity here. He's going to top deck. He's got the Evolution Incense here. I'm definitely thinking that Frank is looking for that Drizzile to start that Shady Dealings. We see it at the front of the deck.
Oh, yeah, we are very familiar with this.
Taking another look, seeing the options.
Yes, and then you'll also notice that Dan, with his Kricketot, was able to get himself a Grotle, which evolves from the Turtwig he just benched, which is his furthest right card. That Grotle has an ability called Sun-Drenched Shell, which lets him, for every turn, search his deck for 1 grass Pokemon. So it's like a Turffield Stadium, except you can search for not just a grass evolution Pokemon, but just any grass Pokemon.
And going off of that, we do see the Drizzile for the Irida. Off of the Irida, we're going to get the Hisuian Basculin, which, Rafal, I don't know about you, has one of my favorite attack names, Gather the Crew. Probably going to see Frank pivot into that here at some point. Frank still gets an item card off of the Irida. We see the Timer Ball at the front of the deck. Maybe that's what we're looking for.
Potentially the Timer Ball, or he got the Drizzle off of the Evolution Incense.
Right, he did.
Yeah, so he is still searching for his item card.
Correct. And I think, getting the Timer Ball might be the right play just because you... Wait a minute.
He's thinking. There's the Timer Ball. And Timer Ball is a very interesting card. It has the potential to be absolutely broken or absolutely useless. You get to flip 2 coins, and for each heads, search for an evolution Pokemon. So if Frank is lucky, he gets a double evolution Incense. If he is unlucky, he just Iridoed for nothing. So,
hey, it's all about, those coin flips, right? And we see Frank, very, smart play here, hold the Timer Ball, right? Trying to just get his board established. Both of these GLC decks, what's really cool about them is I feel that they are, they really focus on getting set up here, right? Frank's getting all of his basic mons down, the Squirtle, the Snom, okay? We see the Whalmer,
correct.
Right? And that Kyogre.
Oh,
okay,
yeah.
so we, hopefully next turn from Frank's side of the board, we see some kind of big plays coming, okay? And it looks like Dan is going to start with that evolution. Oh my God, the double. Here we go, searching for any card in his deck. Raph, what do you think he's going to be picking up?
I'm not entirely sure. He is still kind of in like the setup phase of his deck. Both of them are still looking for their big stage 2s, their energy accelerators. So he could just be looking for, potentially a Colress, a supporter that'll let him draw 8 cards at least. You shuffle your hand into your deck and draw a card for every Pokemon that's benched across the board. He's also using the Evo Soda that lets him evolve his Kricketune into a Kricketot into a Kricketune, which now makes all of his grass Pokemon have 40 more HP. So Dan's still kind of in the setup phase of his deck, but his Pokemon are starting to get pretty beefy.
Yeah, for sure. And that's kind of, one of the really cool things about the grass deck is there's just so many options, right? You have a lot of great attackers. We talked about the Roserade.
Correct.
And so now, like, we're seeing that Kricketune as an option as well, just to make those grass Pokemon a little bit more beefy, getting them out of that, maybe 1-hit KO or maybe even 2-hit KO if we see that Torterra eventually. Okay, we see Dan and Frank. It looks like they're kind of talking a little bit, asking for that cut or tap. And there we go. We see the Colress draw here. My God, is that 9 cards?
That is a 9-card Colress.
Holy. Okay, let's see. Did Dan get what he wanted? We see some Scoop Up Net.
I don't see any Pokemon, really.
Yeah, we don't see any Pokemon, but hey, Scoop Up Net, very good. I feel like the grass deck really does try to use that Scoop Up Net to get at least 2 rounds of that Roserade, right? So we see the reset come down. We see the Fighting Fury Belt making that Zarude have more HP on top of the Kricketune and do a little bit more damage. And it looks like Dan is using that
The Grotle.
Oh, he's using the Grotle.
Shell.
Sorry. Yes, okay. And he's getting that Bulbasaur out. Bulbasaur, another really good Pokemon to get out, so that way that can evolve into Venusaur. And Rafal, can you explain to us why we want to get Venusaur out?
Yes. So Dan, before he also finishes his turn, he's going to do one last thing, which is use Pack Call from the Zarude, which, while it does have a nice attack that gets stronger with the more energy it has on it, it also gets to search for a grass Pokemon. So Dan's early turns just continually are just searching for Pokemon, until, ideally, he gets 3 different Stage 2s out. He has his Venusaur, which makes every grass energy offer 2 grass energy. He has, there's a Timer Ball flips, 1 heads.
Here we go.
2 heads, double
Timer
evolution
Ball
sense.
is a real card this game.
Absolutely busted.
My God.
It is so incredibly strong. Yeah, and so Dan's ideal board will have his Torterra out eventually. You kind of want to keep the Grotle on the board for a while to set up, but Torterra does 50 damage for every evolution Pokemon on the board. So you'll have your Torterra, you'll have your Roserade, your Kricketune, your Rillaboom, which lets you attach 2 grass energy from your deck to a Pokemon every turn, your Venusaur, which doubles the effectiveness of all your grass energy. So once Dan has his full board set up, especially with the Kricketune and all the different tools he has that boosts Pokemon HP, his Pokemon are incredibly beefy and just will be very difficult to knock out, despite Frank's damage output also being incredibly high.
Yeah, for sure. And, enough about Dan's deck. Let's talk a little bit about what Frank's doing, right? We saw the Timer Ball for that Inteleon, right? And it looks like that Inteleon got us a Rare Candy and a Marnie, right? So we're kind of, again, Dan fanning out his really fat Colress hand, right? So we need to kind of disrupt that. We see the Rare Candy into Blastoise, right? We see the attachment onto the Hisuian Basculin, okay? And Frank is just kind of thinking what his next steps are going to be. Oh
my
boy.
Goodness. So many energy just attached to that Kyogre. Yeah, the advantage that Frank has now after that Rare Candy is that he evolved his Squirtle straight into a Blastoise. The Water deck has 2 different energy accelerators, which is Frostmoth and Blastoise. Frostmoth is a Stage 1, but can only attach water energy to the bench, which makes you have to kind of do a little bit of maneuvering with Floatstone, Guzma sometimes to really get your desired attacker into the active. But he went straight Rare Candy into the Blastoise, which has the Deluge ability, which lets you just attach as much water as you want all over the board.
Again, very broken card. That's kind of what we see in GLC, right? You see a lot of cards that maybe have dominated certain standard formats of their time. We've also see a lot of cards that don't, right? Like that Zarude in Dan's deck. I believe that was from Chilling Rain, right?
Something like that. I know it hasn't been played in any competitive decks.
Right, and that's what's really cool about, Gym Leader Challenge is the fact that we see a lot of cards that are very playable, right? And it looks like here Frank is going to use that Kyogre to knock out the Bulbasaur on the bench, and Dan flashing the Venusaur in hand. Definitely don't want to see that if you're on Dan's side.
Yes, the Kyogre just recently came out in Silver Tempest, and it's a newer card in the GLC Water deck. It needs 4 energy, and then you take 3 energy, put them back in your hand, and snipe for 180. And that
Ooh.
synergizes particularly well with the Blastoise, because if you're putting 3 back in your hand, then you have to Frostmoth. It's like, well, how do I get the Kyogre to attack again? With the Blastoise, Frank can just put all those 3 energy right back on next turn.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And then, Rafal, how does Frank get the water back from his discard?
He has multiple different cards that let him do that. He does play Nessa, and VS Secrets use Nessa again, so you can just get a bunch of water energy back with that. He can also set up a Starmie, which has the ability whose name I'm forgetting. You discard a card from your hand, which late game, maybe you never played your Basculin, you never played some of your cards. You can just start discarding them, and you get 2 water energy back from your discard into your hand. So Frank does have ways to get that energy back. However, because of him trying to simultaneously try to set up the Snom and the Squirtle early game, maybe kind of was nervous of Dan trying to knock one of them out and just completely stifle his setup, he does not have room for that Starmie. So if Dan has a way to get a lot of energy in the discard for Frank, he will begin to struggle a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. And so now we're seeing Dan play that Timer Ball. Again, in this match, Timer Ball being a real card, getting 1 evolution Pokemon. And again, we're seeing the Roserade. My God, the Sun-Drenched Shell too. Really, Dan is starting to have these evolutions ready, right? We see the Roserade get any card, that rare candy, so then he could rare candy into the Rillaboom, and he plops down that shiny Genesect, and it looks like now Rillaboom here is going to accelerate, hopefully 2 basic grass energy.
Indeed.
Right onto the Zarude. And with the attachment from Turnroth, we see, is that 4 basic energy?
Yes, that is 4 basic energy on the Zarude, which does, I believe, 60 damage plus 20 or 30 more for every grass energy on it. It does enough to knock out the Kyogre, I'll tell you that.
For sure, and that's exactly what Dan wants, right? We have all of these really broken Grassmons boosting up damage, allowing for crazy abilities, getting cards out of their deck, right? We just see the power of the grass deck coming through, but now we're back over onto Frank's side, right? Frank promotes the Whale Lord. Okay, we're kind of weighing out our options here, seeing what's up. We do have that free bench spot available, so kind of the consolation prize here, right? And it looks like Frank is going to grab that Nessa up to a combination of 4 Watermons or basic energy. He just grabs the 4 energy, and with the Deluge, he just throws them all on the Whale Lord. Dan and Frank kind of having a little laugh about it. Again, that's what GLC is all about, right? The comeback potential, the combos, the abilities. It's really crazy.
Yes, both of these players' engines are incredibly online. Dan's, unfortunately, was slowed down a little bit by that the Bulbasaur getting knocked out, because that would be doubling the damage that the Zarude does, that the Genesect does. It'll make everyone's attacks a lot cheaper.
Well, not necessarily doubling that damage, right? Doubling the energy, which then doubles the damage,
yeah, of
right?
course. It doesn't just increase the damage, it increases the energy.
Right.
You need energy to do more damage.
Right, and so, if you're Dan, really wishing that he had that Bulbasaur to get that Venusaur, okay? It looks like we're seeing that Nest Ball, right?
Yes, he gets to search for a grass energy or a grass Pokemon.
Again, here on the Pokemon...
Netball.
Oh, Netball, excuse me. Again, here in Pokemon, we just love cards that do, a whole slew of options, right? And while he's in his deck, it looks like he's going to Rillaboom to basic energy right onto the active here. I believe Dan's trying to either look for the Torterra, maybe he already has it in his hand, can't really see what is in his hand, but it looks like he's searching his deck still.
Yeah, he's thinking about it.
Yeah.
He might be trying to play maybe a supporter card to try to shrink Frank's hand. I'm not totally sure what Dan is planning for here.
Yeah, it looks like Dan's thinning, getting that... Is that a Thwacky?
It is indeed a Thwacky.
Getting it out of
Which, because you're a
deck.
Candied, is a useless card now.
Right, for sure. But hey, getting useless cards out of your deck, very good. There we go. We see the evolution into Torterra, and hopefully it'll knock out that Whalelord. Dan has what is that, 4
He does
evolutions?
have 4 evolution Pokemon in, and does 50 for every evolution Pokemon on your board.
So it's doing 200 right now.
Which is exactly enough to knock out the Whaler, which has 200 HP.
Look at that, y'all. Dan can do some math. We love to see it.
We love math.
Yes, math, cards. It's crazy. Okay, and it looks like both players are shuffling their hands, putting them to the bottom, and I believe that is a Marnie, right? And
Yes,
so,
Dan just played Marnie.
Yep, we're seeing Dan's hand here. And, he just says, you know what? Let's go for the KO. He's announcing that attack.
Yeah, Frank didn't realize quite how much damage the Torterra was going to do.
Yeah, the Torterra is a very crucial part of the grass deck. Just being able, you're evolving all your Pokemon anyway. Why not play an attacker that has 190 HP, right, and does more damage per evolutions you have out? You love to see it.
And thanks to the Cricket Tune, Torterra now has, I think, effectively 230 HP.
Which is just massive. I mean, being able to, climbing up to 200 plus is so hard to one-hit KO here in GLC, right? Unless you maybe have an attacker that does that has unpotential damage output, right? But it's, again, very, very difficult. Teammates coming from Frank, great card to play if you had a Pokemon knocked out. It's essentially like Raihan, but a little bit better, right? You get, instead of 1 card from your deck, you get 2. Essentially an Arceus V-Star Starbirth just as a supporter, right?
Yes, you don't get the energy back, but for Frank, why does it matter? He can attach as much energy as he wants anyway.
Right, exactly. Thanks, Blastoise. We appreciate you. All right, it looks like Frank taking those 2 cards, still face down, still kind of mulling over his options. Rafal, what do you think Frank is gonna get off of off of the teammates? Oh, we see him. Never mind. It looks like a Versus Seeker, and still contemplating. He was thinking about the Capacious Bucket, but it looks like we're gonna get something else.
Yes, because of the massive Wailord knockout, he did actually finally lose quite a bit of energy, and he used the Nessa last turn. So he is beginning to kind of get to the scary point when it comes to his energy. He will rescue Switcher to get some Pokemon back. I think realistically, just because of the strength of the Torterra and the high HP count it has, Frank just has to sacrifice something. He needs to chunk the Torterra. I think ideally you probably hit it with the Inteleon, do a little bit of damage, and then hope that next turn Dan does not bust up that Wailmer. Wailord can come back and wreak havoc on the board.
Right, yeah, for sure. And I think, having an Inteleon attack start to ping some damage down is also really crucial in this format, right? Pokemon do not have over 300 HP most of the time, right? And so, getting chip damage can really, really be impactful here. Dan searching through his discard pile, double-checking the resources to see, and I believe, did he already Rillaboom?
I don't believe he has this as the energy that he had on the board at the beginning, so it looks like he's Rillabooming now. Very
good, very good. And again, Rillaboom is not only a great Pokemon for its ability, but also has a really great attack, right? I believe the Hammer-In attack does, I think it's like 140, which might not be enough to KO this Inteleon, but it will get him close, right? And I think, and it looks like here we're gonna go with the GGs. I think we ran out of time on our lunch break here, and I believe round 4 pairings are coming up shortly. Rafal, thank you so much for casting with me.
Of course, it was a pleasure. Hopefully we can see each other again sometime.
Yeah, and we'll be right back, y'all, with round 4. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
See you soon.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Nerd Rage Gaming, our 1K. It is post-lunch. We are in round number 4, and we're starting to get to the point where people can maybe ID or get into that top 8 to get some cash. So here before us, we have a mirror match that started just a bit earlier than they were supposed to, but we do have a mirror match of Lugia versus Lugia with Christian Sr. versus Hector or Dan Ibarra. Frank, what do you do in the mirror match?
This mirror matchup is really interesting in my opinion. There's a stigma around the fact that it's very coin flip reliant and that whoever goes first will typically win the game. However, there's a lot that goes into the early turns that can actually kind of flip the matchup on its head and give the player going second an advantage. What we're going to be looking for Christian Sr. is looking to get those 2 R-caps in the discard pile and looking to take a 2-prize knockout on the second turn. However, since Hector started the Pump Glue in the active, it's going to be rather difficult for him to do that. He's going to need a boss's order, switching out for that Radiant Charizard in the active and that Lugia V-Star. So this matchup could be very interesting.
I agree, and I think that's something that is a little maybe undersold about matchups like this, because Lugia, it's kind of a single prize deck at the end of the day, because you have your Lugia V-Star to set up, you have your Luminion to, again, help you set up, and Lugia V-Star is a great attacker, but you have Charizard, you have Raikou, you have Yveltal, I never say that one correctly, and even Archeops itself is a solid attacker, so how do you best maximize that to stretch out the game and put yourself in a position to win?
Yeah, the flexibility of this deck is kind of crazy. It's one of the most flexible decks I think we've seen since the return to Pokemon post-COVID. Important things to make note of are going to be the uses of Aurora energies and powerful energies, because there are instances in which you could save all your powerful energies to respond to an Yveltal and use a Stoutland to take a 2-prize knockout. I've seen this matchup play out a ton of different ways. There's been instances in which the player going first takes a knockout on Lugia, the opposing player takes a return knockout with Yveltal, but the player going first still has access to a wide array of energies, and they're able to take another multi-prize turn, and then the game spirals out of control. I've seen it in the reverse order, where the player going first, for instance, say Christian was only able to knock out this Pumpkaboo. I've seen instances where Dan would be able to take a 2-prize turn and swing the game in his favor. So it's really going to come down to how strong of a second turn, actually, that Christian is going to have, and if Hector is able to do anything about limiting that second turn.
And I think that's a big piece, because it is technically a combo deck where your combo can be over 2 turns. You don't need a ton of pieces to get it going. But if you don't hit it, then, like we said before, it's like you went first but really went second.
Right.
And in this case, it's a little bit of a bigger deal, because that means Dan, if he does pop off and get his turn 2 combo, he's now ahead of the prize trade, not just caught up.
Right. Looking at Christian's board here, he's getting the Oranguru. One of the classics in this matchup for the player going second is usually the Marnie, so Christian trying to play around that, getting that Oranguru and putting likely a supporter or potentially a Lugia V-Star on top, as I'm pretty sure he already has 2 Archeops in the discard pile.
So one thing for a question in this matchup, because we are talking about that prize trade of how do you get your 1, your 2, like what sequence you go in. I believe I saw Christian was playing Raikou. Does Dan also play Raikou?
I think Dan also plays the Raikou. I'm trying to look through.
As a note, when we say Dan, Hector Ibarra also goes by Dan, known by that by different people. So just so you know, that's who we're talking about.
Actually, I don't know if I see the Raikou. Rather, I see a 1/1 line of the Flying Pikachu V and Flying Pikachu V Max. So that might be his lightning commitment, looking to solidify a more solid Lost Box and Reggie Gigas matchup.
That's interesting. And I think the Flying Pika is good in the mirror match too, because obviously it hits for weakness. Unfortunately, it also gets hit back for weakness.
Right.
So Raikou being a basic, less of a threat there, but Christian could take advantage of that to take a big one-shot.
Right. I think the key cards for Dan to get down this turn are going to be that Manaphy, especially Manaphy or Dunsparce. I'd say that Manaphy is more ideal in this situation, as if Christian is able to, it's very unlikely that Christian is able to get 3 energies on the Charizard and load up energies on the Lugia V-Star and attack, or have Boss plus Lugia V-Star outs in his hand. Considering he thinned a lot of his hand out last turn in order to get those Archeops in the discard pile and get that Lugia V down, I'd say it's more reasonable to assume that Christian's going to be playing a draw supporter next turn.
I would tend to agree with that. But Dan can't really bank on that.
Right.
He has to make sure he gets the second Lugia V down, or maybe he's feeling lucky. But in general, it's the game losing play versus the game you keep playing play. And
Right.
I think not getting a Lugia V, if Christian does have a stellar hand, could be a game losing play in this scenario.
Looking at Dan's hand, though, it's not looking too fantastic. I think there's a Lugia V-Star, Double Turbo, a Lost Vacuum, and a Manaphy, I think, were the 4 cards. Maybe an Ultra Ball instead of that Vacuum, it looks like.
It does look like an Ultra Ball, and he's going for the Archeops with the intent to discard it, I think.
Right. I think looking at this hand, though, I think Dan has to play a little bit risky. Going for another Lugia, yes, it keeps him in the game, but I don't see a world in which if he gets this Lugia, his hand's just dead, so he's in top deck mode, which is almost as bad as if your Lugia dies.
That's a fair point. And going for Luminion seems fine here. it normally is weird to put something like Lumineon or Crobat in your hand
Right.
without playing it. But in this scenario, getting the Archeops in the discard is almost or more important than getting that Pokemon into his hand.
Right. On top of that, we have not seen a single Quick Ball from Dan yet so far. Additionally, he still has 2 more copies of Ultra Ball, and he still has copies of Professor Research and Marnie available in his deck.
Absolutely. All right, and Christian does have the Lugia V-Star. So let's see. We're gonna see the V-Star. We're gonna see 2 Archeops come down onto the board, and I'm super curious to see what he has in his hand.
Yeah, this is going to be interesting. I could easily see Christian just having access to another Quick Ball. However, with the way things are moving, I think that's a Marnie and a Speed Energy in his hand.
I agree. That is what I see. So in this scenario, what I would like to see Christian do is double turbo to at least one of the 2 attackers, whether it be Charizard or Lugia, in preparation of making your final decision with the second Archeops. And then I want to see an Oranguru after that. Thin out some of the energy of your deck before you make the decision of what you get off the Oranguru. However, he does not do that. So let's see what he pulls. Looks like he pulled an Aurora Energy, which is not quite what he was looking for here.
Yeah, I think I agree with your play a lot because regardless of whether he attacks with the Charizard or retreats the Charizard, it needs energies on it for either
Correct.
of those requirements. So if anything, you're doing a safe thin where you're not going to get punished for it. Instead, he did not elect to do so and wasn't punished for not doing so. He just didn't get the chance to draw boss and put himself in a fantastic position.
So also looking at this board, there's something interesting to consider. Christian could just pass. He could load up his Lugia V-Star, put a V-Guard energy on it. He could put an Energy 2 on Charizard if he feels like it, and just pass the turn. Because he knows that by clearing off the pumpkin, he's giving Dan additional space. He knows Dan has Lumineon in his hand, so he's going to fill that additional spot. But he could put himself in a position where Dan has to make himself have a very awkward board, and Christian's able to respond to it. Now, I don't know if that's the best decision because he only has a Marnie in hand, but just thinking through, because knocking out this Pumpkaboo is not an efficient use of 4 or 5 energy.
Right, it's not a great resource commitment. However, this Radiant Charizard going down is almost as bad as committing resources to the Pumpkaboo because Radiant Charizard is going to be very important for the end of this game. If a Lugia, when you're thin on resources, you don't have powerful energy, you don't have those plentiful amount of Auroras to attack with Raikou or Yveltal.
Right.
Charizard is a cheap and effective attacker that can, with a Choice Belt and a Heat Fire energy or one of those Aurora energies, could take a knockout on a Lugia or a Lumineon.
And I think in this scenario, Christian just throws a second double turbo onto the Charizard just to save some of those resources. Fine, you take the 1 prize, you set yourself up for success later, and then just set up his board, set up his game, because it's more than likely if Dan has to... Oh, and I don't mind that either. Just capture and a speed energy. Save the Auroras, so you have a little more flexibility. And because if Dan does play Lumineon, he's all but guaranteed going to be playing it for Research or Marnie, so there's little risk of your Lugia V-Star or anything else going down.
Yeah, I think I like the speed energy and the capture energy a lot. Keeping that double turbo around for an Yveltal can allow Christian to potentially only have to bench Lugia V-Star as his only 2 prize liability for the entirety of the game, which will put him on a very good prize trade for the rest of the game.
Oh, that's actually an Irida we're seeing here.
Oh.
Okay, so we're going to see an item card and then a water Pokemon. So we're obviously going to see a Lumineon,
Right.
unless something's crazy here. And then for the item card, what do you expect to see here?
Well, looking at Christian's list right now, I see 1 copy of Lost Vacuum, 1 copy of Choice Belt. Other than that, I don't really see any oddball items, just those 4 Evo Incense, Ultra Balls, and Quick Balls. So maybe he's just going to be grabbing out that the Choice Belt or the Vacuum. Vacuum doesn't have a ton of merit in this matchup. It could be used to get rid of a Choice Belt, but it really just depends on what Christian plans on getting off the Lumineon on the next turn.
It really only matters, like you said, with the Choice Belt of taking it off the Charizard to prevent it from one-shotting a Lugia V-Star, taking it off a Raikou to prevent the same thing, and then taking it off a Lugia means if Lugia V-Star has an additional V-Guard energy on it, you're not ever going to be able to reach that 310 with just powerful energy.
Right.
So I am curious. What looks like he's getting a fish and then a ball card of some kind. Not sure if that's a quick ball or
We'll
what
figure
may.
it out.
And he's actually playing the Lumineon, which is interesting.
Yeah, I'm interested to see that because there's a lot of things that can happen this turn. I mean, this could incentivize Dan to go for a Marnie instead, realizing that Christian is now down more outs to drawing out of a hand. There's a lot of different factors that can go to Dan's turn here. I think the safest one is you only have one Archeops in the discard pile, so it's better to go for the research. Let yourself see more cards and more opportunities to get that second Archeops in the discard.
If he does only have one, I completely agree. I wasn't sure if he had one or two, so I would agree with that stance. And he does go for the research. Well, so one also interesting play Christian has here is, and it looks like Dan top decked the V-Star?
No, he topped like a quick ball. He had the V-Star
okay.
and the Luminion were the two cards in his hand prior to the top deck.
All right, so we do see an evolution in sense, and I believe there's an Ultra Ball in that hand. So he will be able to get the second Archeops in the discard.
You know, I think Dan's in a very good position, actually, despite going second. As we talked about with the Pumpkaboo going down, Dan is actually somewhat in the driver's seat. There's a lot he can do to manipulate his board in a way that allows him to have a very clean board. For instance, he could retreat this double turbo off into his Luminion V and Aqua Return, and then promote a one-price Pokemon such as Dunsparce or Manaphy, whichever, or even the Oranguru. He could promote any of those Pokemon and force Christian to commit more resources to a knockout that doesn't really further the board, it just furthers the prize race.
And to be honest, in response to that, I gotta imagine Christian's gonna do almost exactly the same thing. Going with Luminion, Aqua Return to knock out that single prizer, and throw up a Oranguru or something of his own. Which, that whole sequence is kind of why this matchup can be interesting, because you're bouncing back and forth. You're trying to limit what prizes your opponent can take while making sure your board is free of liabilities.
One thing I want to note, just talking about Christian's previous turn, benching Luminion and telegraphing the play, now Dan is free to commit to this Luminion play knowing he can't get punished because he knows Christian's soul card in hand was likely a draw supporter as opposed to boss.
Right.
Unless that singular prize card was another boss, he's going to be playing a draw supporter, which means Dan can just set up his board however he likes this turn.
And it looks like that's what Dan is doing with the powerful energy, banking on that Lugia V-Star being able to reach and take a knockout on Christian's Lugia V-Star if the opportunity arises. Yep, and it looks like Dan is going to go in with Luminion, take the knockout with Aqua Return, shove that thing back into the deck, and force Christian to kind of maybe not regret using the Charizard, but regret starting the Charizard to take away that capability there.
Oh yeah, this was a really good turn for Dan. I feel like they're just having a little math discrepancy, but it's all works out. 200 damage after weakness. The Heat Fire puts it at 180.
Yep, which is more than enough. And so I believe in this scenario, Dan actually will select who comes up first because an effect of the attack is shuffling it into the deck. So Dan will resolve his turn by putting something into the active.
Yeah, right. Dan has to complete his effect of the attack first.
Yep. And then a knockout will be checked for, which will put the Charizard in the discard. And then Christian will hopefully advance Luminion, unless we're going to see something tricky here.
I mean, he could attack with the Lugia. I think Luminion's just definitely the better attacker here, but attacking with Lugia is the second best choice.
Unfortunately, we can't quite see if it is a boss or a draw supporter in Christian's hand, so we will have to see what happens here. The one thing going for Christian is because there's no V-Guard on the Lugia V-Star on Dan's side, Christian can boss it up and take the knockout if he so desires or has the capability to do so.
Yeah, I think putting the powerful energies there, obviously he knows the card that was grabbed off Luminion and we don't, so those powerful energies, if a boss was grabbed, could be serving as bait, or if he's realized that a draw supporter was grabbed, could just be there preemptively loading up that Lugia in case an Archeops were to get bossed and knocked out.
And it looks like Christian has a research in hand, so I imagine that's what was taken off of the Luminion, unless he took that off the prizes. And so we'll see. We're going to see our first Primal Turbo and see where this energy goes. If I'm Christian, I got to assume it's going to go on to the Luminion. But unfortunately, in this case, it's kind of unfortunate. Because he put up the Lugia V-Star, he's going to need to require more resources to retreat it. But it looks like he is throwing the powerful on the active.
Yeah, I think he's committing to attacking with this Lugia V-Star this turn, which is kind of unfortunate because I believe, is that a capture energy on his active, or is that no, the V-Guard's already in the discard pile, right?
No, I believe he has the V-Guard in his deck, and he's deciding whether or not to attach it. Because it is a capture energy on the active.
Oh, okay, because I feel like if he was going to attack with this Lugia, it'd be right to commit the V-Guard as well to the active, and that way you force an Evoltal out of your opponent instead of the powerful energies commitment. That way, at least they're committing their Auroras. Because with this play, Dan is now able to load up his powerful energies, conserve his Auroras, and threaten both Raikou, Yveltal, and Charizard for the rest of the game.
Well, this is interesting. We're seeing the second Luminion come down, and it looks like what Christian's going to do is boss up the Lugia for the knockout. So that's a big swing in this game.
That is a big swing.
Because now Christian's going to go down to 3 prizes remaining, which means Charizard still needs 2 energy in order to attack. And the only way it's going to be able to take a one-shot on Lugia is with a Choice Belt, which I believe Dan plays 1, or does he play 2?
Dan plays 1 Choice Belt.
So he's going to have to see that now, essentially.
Well, the other option for him is he could use, like I said, Yveltal, commit all
True.
those Aurora energies. I actually feel, though, like this play is really good for Christian, but I feel that Dan is actually in a more advantageous position due to looking at the number of 2 prize liabilities on Christian's board.
Absolutely.
He cannot remove both Luminions and the Lugia before Dan has taken over the game. So it's going to be just a matter of is Dan able to see his bosses, he's able to see the right outs he needs to hit the right attacker, and if he's able to do so, then I think this game is Dan's game to win.
And this is interesting then, because I don't see the belt in Dan's hand, and I also don't see a draw supporter that he could use here. So I'm curious what's going on. It looks like actually it looks like he doesn't have much to do at all in his hand. So he's only going to hit for 250 here. Well, and so here's an interesting thing. Christian likely doesn't, based on the fact that both Luminion are on the board. But Christian does have the opportunity to knock out that Lugia. So Christian has not used his Raikou, he's not used his Yveltal, and he is going to go down to 2 prizes remaining if he just knocks out this Charizard.
Yeah, that's a big swing back in momentum. I thought that Dan was working with a little bit more in his hand.
Oh, and Christian has the boss in hand. That is, ladies and gentlemen, that's all going to seal up this game. Because Dan is going to be able to respond to take the knockout, but if he responds with really anything, Christian's got the resources available to take it down.
Actually, I believe Dan's one way to climb back in this game, yes, is fly.
Oh, man. Are we going to see a flip for Fly to stay in the game?
I was also going to say there's the potential for him to use Stoutland V to take the knockout on this active Lugia. However, I'm not sure if that's in his deck.
I think he discarded it
Yeah, I
turn
was gonna
1.
say, he could have discarded it turn 1 as well. A fly flip here could be huge. But then again, he'd go down to 3 prizes, which gives Christian still 2 turns to get out of it.
And that's the biggest thing, because Dan would go down to 3 prizes, and Christian still could Aqua Return a Luminion into his deck
Right.
to say, Dan, you still have to take 2 to 3 knockouts in order to make this work.
Right. One important thing to note is that I don't know. Okay, well, this obviously this Pikachu has to hit heads, but if Dan is somehow able to cause Christian to expend some Aurora energies, I don't think there's an attacker capable of one-shotting a Luminion, other than through Luminion or Pikachu, other than through the weakness factor.
That is true. Like you said, with Yveltal, that is going to be the way to do it.
Right.
And Dan does have an interesting choice here, because like we're saying, we want to get Pikachu, but he doesn't have anything else in his hand.
Yeah.
And so he's reliant on manually attaching to either Pika or Dunsparce, and then accelerating to the other in order to retreat and go into this attack.
I'm also looking at Christian's list right now, looking at the remaining gust outs around the fly. He has, I think, access to 1 more boss as well as 1 Serena. He's choosing to play the 3 boss and 1 Serena count of Lugia. So he still has a plentiful amount.
He does. And like we've said, he has time.
Right.
So Dan's only going to go down to 3 prizes, which means at least 2 more knockouts. And I do think this is interesting, getting the VMAX just to have it in hand to be prepared. And let's see it.
Whoa.
That is a heads. Flying Pikachu is invincible next turn, essentially. So we take the knockout, obviously, with Dunsparce's still on the board, so it is a knockout. And Pikachu does not take any damage from attacks and is not affected by any effects from attacks. So if you're Christian, how do you respond?
Well, this is actually a big deal for Dan, but there's a boss in his hand, so I don't think it matters.
Oh, is there?
Yeah, there's a
fair
boss in his
enough.
hand. I was about to go on a tangent about how Flying Pikachu VMAX could stop any returning attack from Christian, because I know Dan also plays a big Parasol in his deck. But the combination of boss and presumably 2 more energy cards left in the deck should just about seal up this game for Christian.
Because if Christian does have the boss, all he needs to do is accelerate 2 energy and then boss up either the Charizard or the Dunsparce to close out with his 1 prize remaining.
And I don't think I've seen that many energies played to where he's out.
No, I don't
Yep,
think he's
there's
attached
2
a
more.
single Aurora outside
Right.
of the one on Luminion now.
Yeah, and I saw he had a couple in his hand, but yeah, this is just about it. If he just hopefully he sees the line with the boss.
Agreed. And I think Christian's just taking his time, making sure he hasn't like mixed
Right.
anything up.
Yeah, doesn't want to walk into a quadruple prize loss somehow. That would
Yeah.
be that'd be rather unfortunate.
That would not be ideal. But I think also in general just wants to make sure, yep, and then there you go. All right, we do see Dan say, "All right, you got me, man." So, Christian, you know the best way to win in the Lugia matchup? Just get 3 bosses in your hand turn 2.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Having that access to that second Luminion, that low card hand, meaning that either through top deck or a single prize card, he drew a quick ball, or that Luminion. I don't remember which one it was. So being able to see outs to boss all 3 turns in a row is just about as good as it gets.
Absolutely. And Dan, though I understand his decision to try to get another threat on the board with putting down the Lugia V, unfortunately kind of accelerated his end by putting it there and forcing himself to not be able to go into a single prizer after that knockout.
I think Dan realized, though, that since this Radiant Charizard wasn't taking a knockout, he needs something that doesn't just get return knocked out, because I think the way the trade would work is that Christian would be at 2 prizes remaining. So if he didn't, like when he knocks out the Radiant Charizard, he'd be at 2 prizes remaining, which means that even if Dan were able to return kill, then Christian would go to 1, and Hector would still be at 3 prizes remaining.
True.
Which means he has 2 turns to hit a boss or to power up an Eviltal. So I think he's just trying to find an attacker that could not go down.
Absolutely fair. He needed to tank a hit, and that makes complete sense. All right. Well, this has been a great game, an excellent mirror match. And we're going to jump to our second game going on here on stream. And in this one, we have Larry, who has apparently been a favorite of the stream recently, versus Chris Hogue. Chris is an excellent player who's had a long career of success. It's excellent to have him out here. He's actually been a commentator at some other regionals in the past, so let's see how Regis handles Mew. So, Frank, how, from Chris's end, do you approach this matchup?
Well, Chris is only playing 2 copies of Regigigas, and as we know, Mew recently has been playing at least 2 copies of Lost City, which Larry is playing. So I think it's very important for Chris in this matchup to keep track of which Regis he has access to, and to make sure that his Regis are taking at least 2 prizes when they hit the board. Regigigas is the only Regi that can take a one-shot on a Mew VMAX. However, with him going first, it does give him a window of opportunity to take a quick and cheap knockout on one of those basic Mew V as opposed to the VMAX.
Absolutely. And Regigigas is only going to do 150 base to one of the Mew Vs. However, Registeel actually will knock out a Mew V, because with a 220 base minus 50 for each retreat cost, Mew has free retreat. Regis is going to do 220 to a Mew V.
Right, Registeel is fantastic in this matchup, especially if you're unable to load up a Regigigas and get that choice belt. One of the common ways this matchup can be played is you use your Ancient Wisdom with all your Regis on the board, and then whichever Regis are in danger of being lost zoned and in its entirety, you scoop up net and pick up and wait to play down the next turn when you Ancient Wisdom again. And this way, you're able to conserve your resources. This can also be done through electromagnetic radar to get back scoop up net, because in this matchup you have an abundance of time.
Absolutely. Without Regis getting lost zoned, Mew will always be attacking with a VMAX. And so Chris knows he only needs to attack twice to win the game.
Right.
So for Larry, conserving resources is going to be very important, because those 2 Lost City are going to be his out to win the game.
Right.
Of lost zoning a Regigigas and then lost zoning a second Regigigas will essentially lock him in.
I'm a little intrigued by the grab of the Oricorio. I don't know if that was off of a battle pass or if that was just in his hand, but I don't think Oricorio has. I'm pretty sure after choice belt, right? 330 from a Regigigas minus 20. That's still one shot on a Mew VMAX.
After the choice belt, it is the one shot. The one thing it will stop is minimize snipe damage from a Regileggy. Unfortunately, that doesn't really seem to matter in this situation. But also, unfortunately, Chris is not looking at a great hand here. So he will be able to get the full Regigang down, but I don't know if he has enough energy to really punish Larry for anything right here.
Right, I think there's 2 ways he could go about this. He could either look to draw a quick ball. He has an Aurora Energy and a scoop up net in his hand, I believe. So he could either look to attack with targeted bolt, or he could look to attack with... Oh, does he have another Aurora?
He has a double Aurora.
Oh, this is a big turn for him then.
That is. Knocking out one of the 2 Mew Vs on the board with Registeel is going to put him 2 prizes ahead, and also give him plenty of time to make what happen.
Right, Chris also plays 1 copy of Boss, so that Oricorio could end up being a liability for him, because this means that Chris really only needs 1 Regigigas knockout on a Mew VMAX.
Absolutely. And Chris has used a Serena, but I believe he plays multiple Boss's orders as well.
All right, he plays 1 copy of Boss and 2 copies of Serena, so he still has 2 Gust outs available to him.
Absolutely. And the reason we ask about boss versus Serena, obviously, Oricorio can only be gusted up with that boss's orders, not Serena. So Chris knows it's a resource he'll have to keep in order to map out that 2-3-1 game plan.
Right.
All right, it looks like Larry is setting up his board a little bit better now. I am curious about the Mew grab there, recognizing that Mew is essential. I feel like having another Genesect to draw would be more valuable if he's able to thin his hand down this next turn.
Yeah, I think he's a little bit fearful of whiffing any sort of outs to another Mew, which I totally understand.
Absolutely.
However, I'm pretty sure this past turn, Chris used Serena to draw up to 5, but then he also left himself with 1 card remaining in hand. So maybe Larry's just playing into the fact that that 1 card very well could have been a research, in which case Chris could be off to the races if Larry was unable to find another Mew V.
True. And I do like the judge here. Like you said, Chris has a very small hand, but at the same time, Larry's at the point where he needs to set up. Like, he needs to get a board strong enough where he can stream and start knocking out those guys. The other challenge here, too, is lost zoning this Registeel is good. I think it's excellent. It takes one off the board. But he would do it leaving Regigigas around. And unfortunately, once Regigigas is set up, it's one of the Regis that doesn't say you can't attack next turn or you discard anything. It just stays set up. So Larry would have to, we are going to go for the Lost City here. So we are going to get rid of that Registeel. And then I'm curious if Chris has a response to either bounce the stadium or to take a knockout on this Mew VMAX.
Well, I saw Chris's hand. Chris has a pair of Path to the Peak, a Choice Belt, and a Marnie. So off of that Marnie, all Chris needs to draw is any sort of energy card and an out to Registeel, and this game is going to be heavily in his favor.
Absolutely. All right, we are going to see 5 new cards for Larry here. We do see a Lost Vacuum. We have not yet seen a double Turbo Energy, but it looks like, yep, Larry does have another Genesect to bench.
And he also has access to that Forest Seal Stone still, so he's
Yes.
going to attack this turn.
And I wouldn't mind to see him burn that Power Tablet just to get it off the board and or be able to draw another card. Because Power Tablet's not super valuable in this matchup. There's a double Turbo, so we will have the knockout.
Yeah, Power Tablet is not terribly strong in this matchup. I'm trying to think about, since we know that there is likely an incoming return knockout from Chris, I'm trying to think of what Larry is going to need to do for the rest of this game.
Interesting. We are going to see the Cross Switcher Lost Zone the Regigigas. That is ideal for Chris because now that is one attacker off the board.
Yeah, I really like that play. Chris has a very small-ish window of opportunity where if he can get enough energies in his discard pile, he can set up another attacker with Ancient Wisdom and then use a scoop-up net to re-pick up that Regigigas.
Yes.
Because there is, unfortunately, with the way this matchup goes, like you said, since Registeel is one of those attackers that can just continue to attack over and over with no repercussions, there is a chance that Larry can still just get steamrolled by this solo Registeel.
And that's going to be a big question, is if Chris does not get the Regigigas down, which it looks like he has an out to if he decides to,
Right.
Is it better to knock out the Registeel or gust up and knock out the Regigigas? And I would say for Larry, if you can get the Gust Regigigas Lost Zone this turn and just take the knockout on the Mew VMAX, if you can knock out the Registeel next turn, you just win the game.
Right. I was thinking about whether or not Chris would want to bench this Regigigas here, and I guess it really just comes down to the amount of energies left in his discard pile for Ancient Wisdom, which I don't have a good recall on. It looked like there was an Aurora and a Twin in there.
Well, this is an interesting decision to go in with Regilecky. And I assume the intent is to set up knockouts, so that way if he has to use a different Regi in the future, he's able to do so.
I think his plan here is to target a Bolt, and with this Path to the Peak, hope that that can stick for long enough to let his Regigigas live for a turn. However, if there's a boss...
Oh boy, there's a boss and a Lost City.
I think I see boss, double Turbo, and a Lost City in his hand, which could just leave Chris without any way to power up a Regigigas.
That would be, oh man, this could be scary. Because remember, Larry has not used Forest Seal Stone yet.
That is true. So all he really needs at this point is to draw. Actually, he doesn't need to draw anything if that's a boss in his hand.
He does need a switching out. So he would have to Forest Seal Stone for a switching out if he does not draw it off Genesect. But he's about to bounce the stadium, and he's got time in the world because he's going to draw 4 times with Genesect. And I would love to see the boss here just burn it and draw more cards because you know what your plan is. Yep, there it is. And this is the risk for Chris by retreating the energy off of the Registeel. If he does not, if Larry does respond, knocking out the Gigas, Chris doesn't have an attacker.
Right, I believe if I'm correct though, he didn't even need the Force Seal Stone could have gotten the Mew. So this entire turn, he didn't even need to draw a single card, and he had the Return Knockout plus Lost City combo on the Regigigas.
Absolutely.
Just pretty crazy. However, looking for the rest of this turn, as we've talked about in one of Larry's previous matches, you're just looking to further your lead in the game, to get rid of yourself of any dead cards, basically making your deck comprised of all the things you want to see off of a Marnie.
Absolutely. And I think Chris is recognizing, though, at this point, he has 2 Mew VMAXs loaded up. There's no damage on either of them. He's about to Lost Zone the second Regigigas. So at this point, he can double turbo, or excuse me, Technoblast, retreat, Technoblast to just close out the game. And so I believe he hasn't retreated the Mew yet. So he's going to retreat the Mew. I believe he's going to. I'm not sure what the pushback is here.
Maybe he tried declaring an attack and entering attack phase when you can't.
Possibly. So we may be talking to a judge here or figuring out what's going on. I'm not sure what's happening here. Okay, so it looks like there was a judge call, so we're going to give it a second here while Greg comes over and fixes everything.
I mean, this is one of the things you have to keep track of as the Mew VMAX player, because entering the attack phase, all sorts of tiny board management things has been a hot topic recently among the Pokemon TCG players. Who's accountable truly? Because obviously the pilot is accountable, but it's also the responsibility of the opponent to keep track of the board, as recently added in the rule set.
Absolutely. And so it looks like, yes, it appears Larry did attempt to declare an attack, and Chris said because you did attempt to declare that attack, you are not able to go back and retreat and put that different Mew VMAX in the active to take the knockout.
That is absolutely massive for
It
Chris,
is.
because as shown by his list, that's his only Regigigas left, and if that had gone down there, I'm pretty sure the game would have just about been wrapped up.
And Chris does get the path to the peak, and I believe Larry only plays 2 Lost City, correct?
Right, Larry plays 2 Lost Cities, so that is going to be that second Lost City down, as we've discussed before. Oh, actually, he does play a copy of Silene, so there is a small possibility for that. However, there is also the chance for Chris to use funny enough, use the bad, or use the good Regieleki
Yes.
to Serena and Static Shock for a whopping 20 damage, because the Oricorio's gone. There is no Psychic Leap potential. So this 300 damage is permanent and actually a very big threat.
So we are actually going to see if we can get that Silene and Stadium bounce with a Lost Vacuum or something similar, because otherwise, I'm not sure how Larry pulls this game off. Well, I say that. We haven't used Force Seal Stone yet.
That is true.
So we could Force Seal Stone for the Lost Vacuum to clear the Stadium, and he has Silene in hand. Oh my goodness. So what do you do?
But the question
here?
is, I think you Force Seal Stone first so you can...
Yes,
right,
and he does see it. He does see it.
Yeah, this is going to be a very important turn, because even if Larry is able to do all this bumping and get a Lost City back up, like we talked about, Chris's line is still Static Shock and a boss play. So
Yep.
it's going to be a very intense game.
All right, and we're gonna see a Silene here. Oh boy,
One heads.
We need one heads.
All it is.
that's a
Okay.
tails.
Oh my gosh.
That is a heads.
All
All
right.
right, so we do get the Lost City back.
Yeah, so that Regigigas will be going down,
Yes.
because that Mew VMAX in the active can attack.
The one thing, too, for Larry, though, is he can retreat into the other Mew VMAX
Right.
and continue to target down the Pokemon that he wants to. And I don't mind just burn the power tablets, man.
I think he's
Get
going
those
for
outta
Max
here.
Miracle here, so he doesn't have to put that Mew in that harm's way anytime soon.
That makes a lot of sense. And I don't mind seeing him Cramorant here either to get to do so.
I think Larry's deck's running a little thin, so I think he's just going to conserve those for now.
Fair. And then, yeah, we're going to see the Technoblast for knockout.
All right, yep, we see the
Yep,
knockout.
There's the knockout.
All right, and so off this Gift Energy,
Well, we do see plenty of cards for Chris, but
right, not the ones you want to see.
we do have a Serena, and we do have an Aurora Energy, so we could actually see the knockout with Static Shock.
He needs to draw a scoop up. I think he's looking to see if he
Yes.
can thin his hand with Regidrago in order to achieve that, and it doesn't look like that's the case, so I think this turn
So we are going to see the path. We do have Quick Ball, but yes, per what you're saying, we don't have the Scoop Up Net. So what do you think Chris goes for here? Do you think you get the other Regieleki out and prepared? Do you just try to get the attachment to it?
I think since he has 2 copies of that Regieleki, I think it's very fine to just go ahead and grab that and threaten it.
Yes.
Because there's also the argument that if Larry is unable to get around this Regirock, Larry probably doesn't want to attack into it.
Yeah, absolutely. He wants to force Chris to wait until he can get the Gust combo. And are we going to see a Serena by Chris here to draw? Appears not. Oh, we're going to see a Research. And I believe this is with the intent to hopefully get the Scoop Up Net and then Electromagnetic Radar back the Gust.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I would have played that a little bit more conservative. However, I'm assuming that Chris is obviously very familiar with this deck. I've seen him playing Regis at a number of 1Ks, so I think he's just knowing that his outs of hitting the net and the Electromagnetic Radar for the Serena are higher than having that Regieleki stick for a turn.
Absolutely. So I'm curious to see what Larry's trying to do here. Because he has 4 prizes remaining, it looks like. And we need to really just prevent any way for... Oh, we're going into the Registeel.
I wonder...
And that's a pass? Or are we going to try to take the knockout here?
This makes me wonder if had Chris just like quickly played down that Regieleki and like debated for a turn or like not shown sign of having Serena in hand, would Larry have gone for the Regieleki? Would he have continued to go for the steal? It just makes me wonder. Oh, and he did top deck the boss, so had he just promoted the Regieleki, he would have had the game. But this is a pretty good way to set it up, too. You have 2 of your game-winning card on the board. You have essentially checkmated with... You have 2 Gust outs available, and Larry has like 3 cards in his deck.
But Larry does have Judge. And that's going to be a way to kind of get us back on the same page here of let's level us out. Let's put those Gusts right back in your deck. And then let's see if I can take a knockout and say you're running out of turns to find those Gust outs.
And both players have very thin decks.
They do.
So this Judge, well, usually is very disruptive. Could
Ooh, seems like it was pretty disruptive there
yeah,
for
that
Chris.
looks pretty effective to me.
And so I think for Larry, I think you still have to take the knockout here. Do you have a switch out available?
Well, he can Technoblast because last turn he Max Miracle.
Ah, fair, yes.
So I think, or actually, did he?
No, he did not.
Oh, on the Registeel, right. So
yeah.
this is a
Oh,
pass.
and we do see the Serena. Interesting. So then what are we going to Electromagnetic Radar here for?
I think he Serena's dumps his hand and then gets back Serena.
Yes, I could see that because Larry may have a Judge or so left. The other option here, too, is just to Electromagnetic Radar for... Oh, well, here's the one wrinkle, though. Chris doesn't have any energy in hand.
Right. Well, yeah, I think his goal is to draw an energy this turn and say,
Yes.
you don't have another Judge.
And it turns out Larry does. So we do see the Scoop Up Net. We see the boss's orders. And I assume we're going to Electromagnetic Radar for another Gust out.
Yeah, and if you're Larry, I feel like you almost have to play this Judge. You have to say, I did everything I could to disrupt my opponent. They drew cards, I disrupted them. They set up their board, I disrupted them. So this Judge may end up helping out Chris if Larry chooses to go for it.
The other thing Chris can go for here is an Escape Rope. And it looks like we're going to get a Research, or is that a Serena?
I didn't quite see. It was a little fast maneuver.
As a note, as you can see, it's time shifted. Whenever we have our secondary game, we're always going to try to move through a little quicker so we can get ready to go for the next round to come up. So Chris unfortunately does not play this fast in real life.
And we did see the Judge, so this is a big 4 because I think this might be the last turn, if not the next to last turn, for Chris to win the game.
Absolutely. And it looks like we do see a couple crams, 3 crams in hand for Larry. But I think, Larry, you just got to take the knockout here. But he is counting, I believe, his power tablets to see if he could Max Miracle for a knockout. We are going to see cram. And it is a head. So let's see, I believe...
Is he just looking for a switching card at this point? Or no, because the Mew reset itself.
Right. So I think he's looking for a power tablet to Max Miracle, but I don't think he has any remaining.
I was looking at Chris's hand. I saw Twin Energy, and then I saw what looked like a shiny supporter. So maybe it's that boss. Maybe it's a Research. I guess we're going to find out on the following
we are
turn.
going to find out. So, all right, so we are going to see a knockout, I believe, with Technoblast. And then we see the advance. We see the quick ball. We see the Research.
That's a Research,
We
yeah.
do have the Twin Energy. And it looks like the boss is in deck. All right, so we are going to get a Regidrago. Yeah, I believe from Chris's end, we're just going to see his hand thin down to nothing. But I don't know how many energy he has left.
I think he just has access to 1 Twin Energy, maybe another card. This is going to be... Yeah, judging by that attachment, I'm going to say that that might be... Oh, we see the gift energy.
He does have a second energy left. Okay.
I thought I saw a gift energy off there, but I couldn't quite tell because it's the same color scheme as Ordinary Rod.
And so I think Larry, he needs to take 2 knockouts. But how many... So if I'm Larry in this situation, I'm checking how many scoop-up nets Chris has left. I'm checking how many retreating outs Chris has left because right now, going into your active is scary. And it looks like we did have a scoop-up net. We are going to see the boss, and we are going to see the knockout for game. So Chris does take this game in a bit of a roundabout way, but
yeah,
we got there.
That's a fun way. It's playing their outs, and that's what you like to see, especially he capitalized off that slight slip up, and that's just sometimes what it takes in a matchup.
Absolutely. And Larry, we keep ragging on him, but the man was 3-0 coming to this game, so he knows what he's doing.
Oh, yeah, no, other than that slight slip up, but you know, it's literally, I've said this time and time again, it's just a lapse of judgment on occasion. He's been playing very well, though.
Absolutely. Well, we'll give you guys a quick break while we get the other games set up here, and we'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back, everybody. Again, my name is Dan, here with Frank, and you will all be very excited to hear we have our very first Arceus Duraludon on stream. Frank, are you pumped?
I am a mixture of pumped and a mixture of, I guess I'll just say I'm solely pumped, but I'm a little interested to see how this goes. Owen was priding himself on his stadium count and his, quote, the optimal stadium count. So I'm interested to see how that pans out in this matchup as he does choose to play a lower count of Path to the Peak, which might be a little bit important in this matchup considering Duraludon blocks special energies.
It actually seems suboptimal in this matchup. Pretty suboptimal.
Yeah.
So Christian Fontenot, I don't know how to say his name correctly, sorry Christian, has talked many a time on Twitter, Facebook, everywhere about what the optimum stadium count is for Regigigas. And Frank, can you tell me why that's the optimum count?
They think the optimal count, I say they because I don't know if I agree, is they're playing 2 copies of Path to the Peak, a copy of Stormy Mountain, as well as a copy of Pokestop. And so the idea behind these counts is that Stormy Mountain obviously can search out your Regielekis and your Regidragos, which helps because those are 2 Pokemon that you tend to want to see earlier in the game because of speed energy, because of Dragon's Horde. Those are 2 Pokemon that also can help with your draw support. Pokestop, obviously, it gets you like half of your deck in terms of Quick Balls, Ultra Balls, Ordinary Rods, Choice Belts, Scoop Up Net, Trekking Shoes. The list goes on. And lastly, obviously, Path to the Peak. The Regigigas deck, being a 1-prize deck, is looking to slow down the opponent as much as possible in order to get them to play their game, and Path to the Peak is the best stadium for that.
And that makes complete sense. It's the balance of disruption versus set up your own board.
Exactly.
And in decks where you don't have to worry about something completely walling any of your attackers out from doing anything, having more stadiums that help you set up seem very, very valuable. But in this case, like you said, Owen gets 2 attacks. He gets to attack an Arceus Duraludon twice, assuming he draws well, so he's got to make those count. And so how is Owen going to set up his game plan, knowing that's his limitation?
So the most important thing is that those Paths to the Peaks cannot come down unless an attack, preferably a knockout, is being taken. That being said, if Alex is playing copies of Lost City, which, looking at his list, I don't think he plays any Lost City, which means that Owen is going to have plenty of time to develop these Regigigas attacks, meaning that this 2 Path to the Peak is actually going to work out in his favor in this matchup.
And that's a very interesting stadium count for Alex, with the 2 Lake Acuity and 1 Crystal Cave and 1 Collapsed. So the Collapsed Stadium certainly can be beneficial because Owen will obviously need all 6 different Regis on the board in order to accelerate. So that can slow him down a little bit. Though obviously, as we said, even though Owen does have a split of stadiums, he still has enough bounces for it. So this is going to be interesting. The other interesting thing is, can he switch into Arceus right now? Okay. Alex is actually benching a second Arceus here. How do you feel about that decision?
I think that he's playing a little too safe in this matchup. I think in this matchup, Arceus simply going for Trinity Charge is more than enough, and I think that with the current board position you have, and looking at his hand, if your Arceus goes down, the game's looking pretty grim to begin with. Looking at Alex's list, he does play a copy of Ryan, so maybe he's thinking that end all be all, he's at least going to get a Trinity Nova off next turn. I was actually just looking at what Lake Acuity does because I don't think I've ever seen that card in play before. So Lake Acuity says that all Pokemon that have water or fighting energy attached take 20 less from attacks from your opponent's Pokemon. So I'm thinking that that's looking to be geared more towards like an early game aggression from Lugia, potentially letting your Duraludons live. It could be good against Lost Box. It has a lot of niche uses.
And combined with the healing of Hyper Potion and the like, that can maybe turn 2 shots into 3 shots, which is very valuable since Arceus Duraludon's really strategy is just tank.
Right.
Like, you have to go take 8 prizes, and you have to take 8 prizes, including 2 330 HP monsters that you can't use any special energy to hit. And to your point of playing too safe, I think this is kind of coming true here because in order to knock out the Arceus, Owen would have had to have the Regirock, additional energy in the discard, a scoop up net, and the boss to knock out that Arceus. Now, unfortunately, with Alex putting down another Arceus V, Owen only needs to go through 1 Duraludon VMAX.
Right, and looking at Owen's list, he does have 2 copies of Serena and that single copy of Boss's Orders, as we've seen time and time again from these Regigigas lists. So Owen's going to have a number of opportunities to take advantage of the double Arceus bench from Alex.
Do I see an energy recycler in Arceus Duraludon?
Yeah, I just did a double take. I did not believe my eyes. Energy Recycler is definitely an interesting inclusion. I've seen in a number of Arceus Duraludon lists the inclusion of Ordinary Rod. I played Ordinary Rod in my list a way back. Recently, Training Court has taken precedence as the need for Crystal Cave has dimmed down a little bit with the rise of Lugia and Eviltal being cards that tend to one-shot as opposed to looking for those 2 shots. So Energy Recycler is certainly interesting. However, I can't say that I don't see the reasoning for it.
I would agree with that. It seems, well, we said we give them Arceus Duraludon, but we are seeing a very, very interesting version of it. So I am curious to see how this plays out. The advantage, though, that Alex will have with Lake Acuity, with Collapse Stadium is, as much as the game plan long-term is to tank with the Duraludon VMAX, if he can get far enough ahead in prizes, Owen's going to run out of time to try to get that Path Regigigas knockout. And it should be noted, too, just getting the Path isn't enough. Owen's also going to have a... Oh, I'm sorry, he's drawing because of the gift energy. But Owen's also going to have a choice belt on his Regigigas in order to take that knockout. So if Alex is able to get rid of those belts through Gus or knockout, if Owen has to discard them, Alex is going to feel pretty good that it's not going to be easy to knock out that Duraludon.
Yeah, right. We were talking about the fact that with those 2 Paths to Peak and that 1 Duraludon, as you mentioned, there is still a clock that exists. So this turn, Owen really, 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 really needs to put some pressure onto Alex, whether it be through the form of a Marnie or preferably taking a knockout on this Arceus, because if Alex is able to charge up 2 Duraludons before Owen even attacks, there is potential for Alex to just continue to disrupt Owen's board through the use of that Collapse Stadium in his hand, through the use of Marnie. There may never be an opportunity for Owen to play 2 Boss or Serenas onto these Arceus.
Absolutely. And so it looks like Owen does have the double Aurora or triple Aurora in the discard. He does have the Regirock, so he just needs the Ice and Lecky, and then he will be ready to take a knockout on this Arceus. Let's see, it seems not the card he wants. Getting rid of those scoop up nets doesn't feel great because that's how he's going to draw and try to avoid really getting, I guess, his hand and his board disrupted enough before he can take the knockouts he wants.
Luckily, he's got that Air Balloon on the active in combination with that Gift Energy, so he does have that pivot. Arceus Duraludon typically does not play any form of tool removal. However, Alex does play 2 copies of Tool Jammer, which could prove irritating for Owen.
I'm honest. Well, that actually is a very important thing then. Because if there's a Tool Jammer on the Duraludon VMAX, Regigigas can't one-shot it. And I don't think Owen plays any tool removal.
Yeah, I don't think Owen plays any tool removal either, which further means like that the second Arceus being benched is even more important because now these 2 Paths to the Peak may be used to have to do 2 two-shotting Regigigas attacks onto the Duraludon.
Absolutely. So instead, though, unfortunately, Alex kind of paves the way.
Right.
So we're going to see, and I think the tricky part, too, is even though we're saying that Owen's going to be able to one-shot when he puts down the Path or he'll have to two-shot, Alex will still have to bounce that stadium the next turn. Otherwise, he's still going to lose that Duraludon VMAX.
So unfortunately, Owen did not get the out to the Regieleki, which gives Alex yet another turn. I don't know if Alex has used his... It looks like Alex has used his V-Star.
He has. He used it to set up in the last turn.
So this turn is very interesting because Alex can't do anything really to capitalize off of Owen's slow start except for take the knockout. So obviously putting on taking the prize and putting on the pressure is important, but Owen does not have to worry about needing 2 boss outs, yet he still only needs that 1 boss out in combination with knocking out the Duraludon.
Absolutely. And I think we did see Alex do this. One note for our viewers at home, based on the order of kind of operations in you play, when you do use, say, Arceus Trinity Nova, you attack, do the damage, resolve effects of the attacks, which is getting the energy out of the deck to put on your guys, and then check for knockouts. And after checking for knockouts, you then take a prize. So Alex, in this case, just took the prize and threw it on top of his hand. But it's important here because with Arceus, we are trying to accelerate onto your attackers. You're not actually allowed to see what prize you take before placing the energy. So just as a side note, I'll attempt to have this be an educational video every now and then. So from Owen's side, looks like he does get to go into the Regirock. He will need to have a bounce for that collapsed stadium, though. And we're going to lose another Scoop Up Net, a Regieleki. Oh, and he had the Regieleki, too. That is unfortunate. All right, but we do see the Stormy Mountains, and if he doesn't already have the Regieleki in hand, he will be able to get that out of his deck. Or, out of his prizes.
Yeah, that Stormy Mountain, the optimal stadium count conversation coming into play here, because I'm not quite sure if I saw a Quick Ball or any other search out in his hand, so that Stormy Mountains is proving useful.
Absolutely, and I think there's only one Regieleki in his discard, the one he just discarded, so he should have an out to it. So for Alex, he's got to be feeling pretty good. He's taken 2 prizes. He hasn't gotten attacked even yet. So from here, what do you think he's trying to do?
I think Alex needs a Tool Jammer. Basically, I think Tool Jammer is the most important thing for him to get to because looking at these lists, Owen has no way to handle a Tool Jammer. This Arceus V, funny enough, I think it may be in Alex's best interest to promote this Arceus V and use Power Edge before promoting the Duraludon because you want that Duraludon to go up on a turn where you know it cannot get knocked out. That way, you can draw into your cards such as Hyper Potion and other cards that can mess with your opponent's board. We do see a Marnie, which can help him to build a hand advantage, but I would like to see him promote that Arceus V instead of the Duraludon here.
I would absolutely agree with that. And also, in this situation, he can... oh, well, sure, okay. In this situation, too, he can Ultra Ball away the Ultra Ball and the Double Turbo to get an Arceus V-Star and use that as his attacker rather than the Duraludon. Because I agree to your point, you're not going to want to expose this Duraludon VMAX until you have a Tool Jammer on it.
I would have liked to see him attach that Double Turbo, especially since he promoted the Duraludon. I'd like him to see him attach that Double Turbo to his Duraludon as a way of healing off of Hyper Potion. Because the way he's playing right now, he's banking off the fact that he's going to draw Tool Jammer. If Owen is able to, a combination of Gift Energy plus Marnie, and presumably his supporter per turn, if he is able to get a Path to the Peak and Choice Belt, then this game is going to be really difficult for Alex to climb back into with that Arceus in play.
Absolutely agreed. And he did not hit the Tool Jammer, so he's unfortunately going to be a bit of a rough spot here.
Right.
We do see the Parasol, and that's not horrible either, because it prevents at least Regis from doing anything, but Arceus is going to get one shot by Regirock anyway.
Yeah, I think Owen is the... It's up to Owen this turn to really punish Alex for this this play he made. Now, I don't know what his hand was off of this Gift Energy and Marnie draw, but I think all he needs is an Energy, the Regirock, which I saw him draw.
And he needs the belt, which he also has in hand. And he has the energy.
So now all he needs is that Path to the Peak, which with 2 of could be a little difficult to find here.
But he does have a research in hand, so he's going to see a whole lot of cards. This, I'm not sure how I feel about, unless he's about to drop the Path.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what's going on here. He might, like you said, he might just have that Path in his hand.
Does not appear that he does, but he actually has to get rid of his second choice belt. So he's got to hope he hits the Path here.
Yeah, Alex,
and is he going to slam it down? He slams it down. He has the Path. And see, that's unfortunate because now Alex put himself in the position where that could happen.
Right.
If he had advanced the Arceus, Owen wouldn't have had the out to do that.
Right. If Alex had forced Owen to, off of his 7 cards plus draw for turn, have Boss, Replacement Reggie, Path to the Peak, and Choice Belt, that would be very difficult for Owen to obtain, considering he is already down a Gust out, I believe.
Absolutely. And Arceus is going to take a knockout here on this Regigigas. And with the Lake Acuity, Regirock actually doesn't one-shot it.
Yeah, that's pretty neat. That's going to come down to this final choice belt. Also, though...
Well, Owen actually discarded the second choice belt.
No, he has 3 copies of choice
Oh, he has
belt in
3
his
choice.
deck.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, I should have clarified. Owen does have 3 copies of choice belt, so it's going to be down to finding that third one. But also, Owen has 2 turns to attack into this Arceus. If he even if his Regirock hits it for, what is it, 280 minus 20? So even if he hits it for 260 damage, 2 Hyper Potions, leaves it with 20 damage still on it, which means that another Regirock would just clean up the knockout. So all he has to do is attack with Regirock for the next 2 turns.
Well, and I would say, I believe he has a big Parasol on there. Otherwise, Reggie Ice could have even done the same thing.
That is true.
But agreed. He knows that this Arceus has to take 3 prizes. So Owen can 2-shot it and still win the game.
Right.
So the biggest thing is for Alex, he's going to be relying on Owen missing an attack here. Because otherwise, Owen's just kind of got it.
All right. The only thing left for Alex to do this turn is to accelerate enough energy so that he can do the double Hyper Potion play and then hope that Owen is unable to chain back-to-back Regirock plays.
Yes.
Or have a Stadium Bump.
Yes, agreed. And so we are going to see that we have an Ultra Ball here. We have the other choice belt. So then, really, is there a Regigigas available?
Right. That's all it takes.
And it is. We're going to see that. We are going to see the acceleration through Regigigas ability. And then are we going to see the belt? Oh, we don't even need the belt because the Lake Acuity goes away. So, all right. There you go.
Yep, that's it.
And Alex, there you go again. Alex was in a dominating position, feeling great about taking the game, but exposing that Duraludon VMAX really cost him.
Right, especially early in the game when Owen whiffed an attack onto the Soul Arceus V-Star. Had Alex been able to, obviously his hand didn't permit it, but had he been able to have access to another Duraludon V, we get into a board where Owen has to take essentially 8 prizes to win the game. But instead, with that Arceus V being benched, Owen only had to take 7. 4 of those prize cards are easily obtainable through the use of Regirock.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to go on to the next game here since we have another one going, and this is also an interesting one. So we have Weezing versus Lost Box, and I am fascinated to see how this one pans out. Lost Box, unfortunately, has had a bit of a disadvantage here because they really rely on the capability of getting abilities over and over and over again in order to set up their Lost Zone, Mirage Gate, and go from there. But with Weezing shutting that down, that's going to be kind of challenging. So we're going to see how effectively Gage can set up here and just put himself in a position to take the win when he can.
Yeah, this matchup is really, really, really tough. It's going to come down to the ability to see Colruses consecutively for Gage, as well as timely Raihans in order to set up attackers such as that Raikou. Raikou is very important in this matchup as, unlike Rayquaza, Gage is playing the Lost Box Rayquaza variant, but Raikou does not have to discard energies, which means it's a very low maintenance attacker that will get to attack at least twice due to the math on Weezing.
Absolutely. And it'll take 2 prizes across those 2 attacks.
Exactly. It's one of the few Pokemon that can trade well in the Lost Box deck.
And we are going to see this one coughing, and it doesn't look like Ken has anything else to really set up a second Weezing, but this may just be enough depending on whether or not Gage is able to get a Colress off or anything like that.
Yeah, all he has is that Boost Shake, so it's just going to get the Weezing, which means it's all up to this Colress, which is only going to get 2 in the Lost Zone, and Cramorant obviously cannot attack, which means he's safe for at least another turn.
Absolutely. So we do see a Quick Ball, we do see an Ice Cube, and unfortunately it looks like we don't even have a Colress in hand. So we're not going to be able to Lumineon for it either based on Weezing locking them out. So the question is going to be then, does Gage just kind of raw draw what he needs to in order to make an attack? And getting the Rayquaza I think is a great decision because you can start manually attaching.
Yeah, Rayquaza is going to be the only Pokemon in Gage's deck that can take a one-hit knockout onto the Weezing. So looking at a seemingly underwhelming turn from Kenneth, Gage is looking to capitalize on that and say that I'm going to put you on, what is that, a 3-turn clock, and in the next 3 turns, if you don't draw a basic or you're unable to mess me up, then I'm just going to knock out your only guy.
Absolutely. So if you're
There's
I guess
a Colress
Frank
at the top of that hand.
there is a Colress at the top of the hand. Excellent. So I guess while Gage is looking at this Colress, Frank, tell us a little bit about how this Weezing deck functions. Like, what does it try to do?
So this Weezing deck plays a 4/4 line of the Galarian Coughing and Galarian Weezing Obviously, Galarian Weezing's ability neutralizing gas says that when Weezing is in the active spot, it's the only ability in play. So the point of this deck is that Lugia V-Star cannot use its V-Star, Comfey cannot use Comfey, Cramorant cannot use Cramorant, Arceus cannot use Starbirth. So basically, the point of the deck is to slow down your opponents and force them into positions where the only thing they can really do is attach 1 energy per turn and hope that that gets by. This deck does really well in the recent meta, where Lugia consumes about 30%, Lost Box is another 20%, and then other random decks that just are unable to put pressure onto Weezing. It does really well in that. One of Weezing's biggest downfalls is actually the Mew matchup, where if they just get 2 Mews and alternate and use their power tablets in a resourceful way, to where Weezing cannot keep up with that.
And that's kind of the Weezing deck's issue is it can disrupt extremely well. It can stop the opponent from playing their game. But if they do, it can't really do much. So for Gage, he is, it looks like, going to... Did he play the Team Yell Grunt? I can't really tell.
He just Pokegeared for the Team Yell Grunt. I think Gage was just wanting to see what it does.
Okay, fair enough. So for Gage, it looks like he did get a Colress off that last Colress, which is a big deal because now he's going to be 1 card away from being able to Mirage Gate. And once Gage can Mirage Gate, having the Weezing ability there doesn't really matter that much since he can keep cycling energy. And Gage finds another Colress off of that Colress, and that's huge because unless his hand is disrupted, he's going to be able to go in and get those last 2 cards and get that Mirage Gate rolling.
Gage actually elected to take the Echoing Horn over the Metal Energy off that, which I think is a very heads-up play because if he's able to take 1 knockout on a Weezing, then he can then Echoing Horn, the Coughing back out, and use an Escape Rope to allow him to use abilities, which can then allow him to dig through more of his deck and set up a board that cannot be heavily affected by Weezing.
Ah, that's an excellent point because what Ken is going to try to do is prevent anything on his board that's not a Weezing from staying there.
Right.
That's why he plays the Boost Shakes.
Yeah, the 4/4 line, looking at it, the only form of Pokemon recovery he has is, I think, a copy of Team Yell Cheer. I'm looking for it. Oh, he plays 2 Clara, not 2 Team Yell Cheer. He plays 2 copies of Clara, which can put those directly back to hand. So Kenneth is going to have Clara on the turn that knockout occurs, which is looking to be this turn.
And it looks like Gage is making a decision of what to keep there. The Wash Energy makes sense. The Comfey makes sense. He has a Air Balloon here and a Metal Energy. So one tricky thing with Rayquaza, it is not discard as much energy as you like. It is discard all energy.
I think a really good play this turn would be able to do that Raikou, and it is in the prizes.
Ah.
So this is very nice because now he doesn't even have to play into hoping that he can use the Echoing Horn and Escape Rope play. He can just say, if you don't have another basic, I win next turn.
Absolutely. And so we'll see what happens here. It looks like we are going to attach the metal. And Gage is carefully counting out what energy he has in deck. He needs the grass and he needs lightning, which he has plenty of.
Right, he's made, as you said, careful note of that through the Lost Zone. And he's also made it sure to take an extra second and check his prizes just one more time to be safe and make sure that he was going to be able to do this Raikou play before he committed to it.
Absolutely. And that's one of the tricky things. We mentioned it with Joe, is checking your prizes matters a lot here.
A ton.
And in a situation like this where he needs an exact attacker, which is the Raikou, it's kind of tough. So how are you feeling if you're Ken right here?
I'm nervous. Looking at his hand, I don't think I saw any sort of draw supporter. I don't think he's seen a Colress this entire game. So if I'm him, the only thing I can do here is try and stall because none of my disruption supporters affect, but everything on Gage's board has a 1 energy retreat cost, and there it is.
There you go. That's it right there. So that honestly, I think even though it's a quick game, it kind of encapsulates what Weezing tries to do and how to respond. Weezing tries to stop you from playing the game, but if you can play the game, just kind of win.
Right. At the Knoxville Regional Championships in top 4, we saw Nick Moffitt and Brandon Salazar. They played this matchup, and in this matchup, Brandon Salazar was playing also the Eternatus in his deck, which was he had a little bit more consistency in his deck, ways to see basic Pokemon. It was a little less disruption focus, which ended up helping in that particular matchup because he was able to draw into his Coughings in a more timely manner. He was able to use Eternatus whenever big attacks were getting set up, for instance, that Raikou. So as we saw in this matchup, playing the absence of those Pokemon actually were to Gage's benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. And so thank you guys for watching this round. It's been a couple interesting matchups. And we're just going to take one quick more reminder. Hope you guys are enjoying. Hope you guys are liking the games. We've tried to show you some interesting ones, especially this round. But yet again, we're going to have our next 1K in April 29th, $1,000 guaranteed prize. Players here are playing for a $1,000 guaranteed prize today. So hopefully you guys see you out here in a little bit. And we'll take a quick break before the last round of Swiss. Welcome back, everybody, in our last round of Swiss, and we've got a couple win and ins for you. We have Jarek playing Regigigas, playing against Christian, playing Regigigas, and they both start Regis. Sure, with Christian going first, that seems like an advantage. So, Frank, tell us, how the heck do you handle this mirror match?
So there's a lot of different cards people can play in this matchup to give them an edge. One that's been recently popularized is the inclusion of Cape of Toughness, which both players have here. An interesting note about Christian's list, I was talking to him about this before the event. He's a longtime Regi player, obviously he top-8'd at the Arlington Regional Championships with Regigigas, and he's just looking to switch it up and spice it up. And so in his deck, we see the inclusion of a 1 Pidgeot V and 1 copy of 4 Sealstone. For those of you that don't know, Pidgeot V has an ability which name is eluding me, but the ability says that when Pidgeot V is on the bench, you can shuffle it into your deck. So the combination of 4 Sealstone and Pidgeot V allows for you to essentially get a free card out of your deck at the expense of your V-Star, which prior to this inclusion, Reggie didn't use its V-Star.
Yeah, when you showed it to me earlier today, I may have said a non-professional word asking why it was in there, but it makes sense. If you got a free computer search on a guy you could just throw straight back in the deck, that's not too shabby.
And on top of that, with all the various discard cards through Professor's Research, Quick Ball, Ultra Ball, the inclusion of Pokestop, since he's also playing the, quote, optimal stadium split, there are a lot of ways to get rid of that Pidgeot V upon its usage.
Absolutely. And Christian looks like he's setting up pretty well here. He's got the speed energy down the Regieleki. Again, starting the Regis, which is fine. You just want to get the Regis down. He's got a couple quick balls in hand, too. So we may see some good stuff here. And looking at Jarek's hand, that's... it looks like there is a Marnie in there, I think. Yes, there is a Marnie.
Yeah, an Ultra Ball, a Gift Energy, or a Capture Energy. So Ultra Ball and Capture Energy is a choice spell that's an easy discard. Boss is maybe an easy discard as well. I'm not entirely sure. The interaction between the both Cape of Toughness from the players could incentivize keeping the boss's orders around to get around Cape of Toughness if the Cape does not make it down until later in the game.
So where would that Cape typically go?
So it's interesting. I think Cape usually, you want to put Cape on one of your attackers that you would like to stick around for a turn in terms of maybe it's a Regidrago, like maybe you have a bad hand and you need your Regidrago to stick around to Dragon Sword twice. Maybe you're committing to an attack with the Regigigas. The best Pokemon, I think, is Regidrago because it's the Pokemon with no weakness. So it cannot get return knocked out upon being attached to it. So typically Regidrago is where you're going to want to have that. However, we do also see that Christian is working with the, quote, Badaleki on his side of the board. So I don't think there's any Lightning Weak Pokemon in Regis, but if there were Lightning Weak Pokemon, that could also be a suitable place for the Cape of Toughness.
Well, Badaleki isn't actually horrible here either, because if Jarek ends up benching Goodaleki, then it's going to be able to snipe it on the bench, while leaving a Pokemon that you don't really mind getting knocked out in the active. And Regidrago makes sense, because Regidrago does a flat 160 damage, which I think is the only attack that guaranteed one-shots every Regi, with Regigigas having 150 HP.
Well, Regigigas would also be a guaranteed one-shot, but it's a far, it's more strenuous commitment, obviously, with Twin Energy and attachment. Regidrago's more efficient, we'll say, in terms of energy cost.
Absolutely. And also, it's one of the Regis where you want on the board all the time in the active regardless to help you draw and can maintain that consistency. So we see Jarek putting down the Regirock. Already got the Regidrago on the bench with the Capture Energy. Getting rid of the Choice Belt's fine. The Ordinary Rod's kind of a bigger deal.
Yeah, Jarek plays 3 copies of Ordinary Rod. I think in this matchup, it's just some of these resources just have to go in order to be in the driver's seat and to keep pace with your opponent.
True.
And as well as we've mentioned, there are a number of Regis that, whether it be through weakness or just through raw damage, there are a number of Regis that can hit for one-hit knockouts. What we forgot to mention is that Regirock can also one-shot everything because it hits for weakness on Regigigas. So
true.
There are 3 Regis that can take knockouts, excluding the attachment of a Cape of Toughness. So I think it's just going to be about using those 6 Pokemon through 2 of each to get your knockouts.
Absolutely. And so one thing I'm kind of curious about there is, like you said, Jarek only plays 3 Ordinary Rod. He had an option to discard the boss or the rod, and I'm curious why he discarded the rod instead of the boss.
I think he's thinking about the play I was mentioning at the beginning of the game, where the Cape of Toughness later down the line could prove difficult to get around. And I think, as we also mentioned, that there are 3 different attackers that can adequately handle with the board. So I think he's just seeing that and realizing this boss will likely have more utility than one of my 3 copies of Ordinary Rod.
That's a fair point. It's a fair point. And I think with the good Alecki, being able to snipe is a good way to kind of level out the maybe the spread, or excuse me, use the spread to kind of level out who you want to knock out win.
Right.
Especially with that cape, because being able to spread 40 pretty much negates the effect of the cape, so should be good.
If Jarek is unable to get an attack off this turn that was taking a knockout, I think this Regigate should go for the 130 HP Regieleki so that he does not give Christian a free window to just take a knockout with his Badalecki, because there is an incentive maybe for Christian to use that Badalecki so that he can set himself up to put his good Alecki down later along the line when he wants to set up math to get around Cape.
Absolutely. And that's an interesting drop for the cape on the Registeel. Would that fit better on like the Regieleki or somewhere else?
I think it's similar to what we mentioned before. It's one of the Regis that doesn't have a weakness that another Regi accounts for. So
Fair.
he's just thinking about that and saying, because you could see his face, he's like, well, this isn't ideal. A lot of the Regis have a retreat cost of 3, which means that I'm not going to be taking a one-shot with Registeel. But maybe he's also thinking about that and saying, my Registeel can 2-shot the other Registeel and not get knocked out. Or 2-shot whatever has the cape on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is capable, I believe, of one-shotting the good Lecky, which, again, is kind of the weak link here when it comes to the back and forth.
Right, that Regieleki is the only thing that Registeel can take a one-hit knockout on.
Yeah. All right, so we'll see what Christian's doing here. Actually, I'm not sure what is Christian. Oh, he's Ultra Balling with his hand down in the middle of the field. Thank you. That helps a lot. All right, and it looks like Christian does have at least 2 Aurora in the discard and a Twin.
Right.
So he's going to be able to attack, but is he going to be able to get the Regice out of the active in order to attack?
Yeah, because attacking this Regice, it puts 100 damage on it. It could set up the Godalecki to work some numbers, but I definitely don't think that he wants to be banking on damage taking in a deck that plays Scoop Up Net.
Especially not this early. Jarek has gotten rid of at least 1 Scoop Up Net, but it looks like he is going to go for the 100 damage here.
Yeah, he probably doesn't have access to Scoop Up Net, and there's no reason not to do the damage, obviously.
Absolutely, because the energy is going to get right back if this thing gets knocked out. All right, so we are going to see a quick ball, and I think Jarek was very smart to hold off on getting the good Alecki during the last turn, because he's not going to attack anyway. So just hold on to it and then use it when you're ready to attack.
Or yeah, had a knockout come down this turn, he may have decided to end up going for the good Alecki instead of this bad Alecki, but however, now he sees that he wants to put down that bad Alecki to make sure that Christian's opposing Regieleki does not have a free snipe on the board.
Absolutely. And the chat appears to be very hot and cold on their love for Christian right now. So we're going to see if he actually gets a few fans as we go through this game. So Christian seems stressed, and I could understand that. But Jarek, unfortunately, isn't in a great spot, especially with 2 of his 3 Rod down before Christian even has taken a knockout. So how do you think that affects Jarek's decisions going forward?
I think the absence of Rod is just going to force him to be very mindful of which Regi he attacks with, in the sense that I think he knows that Christian plays a copy of Boss, and I think he knows that going forward he's going to have to make sure that he's always keeping access to 1 Regi at all times. However, in this matchup where neither player plays more than 1 Gust out on the bench, it's not devastating because it's not like Lugia or Mew where they can Lost Zone and continuously Gust and get those Pokemon in the discard pile. So I don't think it's a huge deal.
Okay. And he does clearly still have the other Rod in deck, so it isn't out for him later. And I think right now it's probably not going to burn him too badly, but as we get later in this game, Christian takes a couple prizes, that's when I think things may get a little scary here. Also, does Jarek just have another 3 Aurora energy in his hand?
I think I saw that, yeah.
So on the bright side, he is going to also get an attack off on this Regice at a minimum, but I don't know if I see a Scoop of Net or anything.
Right, I was about to say this might just be a back and forth of attacking with the Regices, which is Very eventful.
Yes.
It's a mirror match of mirror matches.
Yes, a clash of titans, as they've said.
Yeah, all we need left is the Cape of Toughness on the Registeel and the Speed Energy on the Alecki.
Like, hey, to be fair, Registeel can take a one-shot on Reg Ice because it is weak to steel.
That is true. That is very true.
That is, if we see that interaction, I will be very surprised, though, because
Right.
you don't want either of those guys active. All right, so it looks like Jarek is deciding where to use Regigi's ability and where to place that energy. I gotta imagine he does attack into the Reg Ice because there's not really a downside if he doesn't have a
Right.
switch out.
Oh.
But he does have the switch out. All right, so what's the move here?
I think he can attack with anything now that he has, except the Regigigas, now that he has all the 2 Aurora's energies plus the capture. I think he can attack with anything, so it's just a matter of what he has easiest access to, or maybe what his hand's looking like post, like going into the next turn. Does he need to Dragon Sword? Can he afford to attack with Regidrago?
Well, it's also got to be part of what does he have the most copies of, knowing he's down Ordinary Rods.
Right.
And it looks like he does have a second copy of pretty much everything on his board available, which is good.
Funny enough, I think Registeel's actually a good attacker here
I
because
would agree.
it does 70 damage after the reductions from retreat cost. Times 2 is 140. So it's one of the few instances in which it can take a one-shot.
Absolutely. And I think Jarek is going to go in with Regidrago, which I don't blame him for, but I agree. This seems like the time to use Registeel, because when else would you need to use it?
It might just be a case of he has a backup Regidrago in his hand, in which case this makes total sense.
Absolutely. And we do know that he discarded it early and ordinary rotted it back into the deck.
Right.
So it looks like we are going to see a Dragomir match. You are allowed to attack with a different Regi than they are, just so you guys know. I don't know if we need to tell them that. So we're going to see the capture energy, which is good, because then he'll be easily able to get the Reg Ice back out. Assuming one is in prize, but I believe he did fail the heavy ball earlier, so we should be good here. And this is interesting now, because one route Christian can take is to continually put guys in the active that Jarek has to use Regidrago to knock out.
That is true. I think one important thing to note when we're talking about Jarek's previous turn and his promotion is we don't know what's in his prizes.
Absolutely.
So obviously we were talking about this matchup how your better attackers are the Regirock, the Regidrago, and the Regigigas, but he could just be missing some of them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And like you said, that can influence the decision of which one to go with. So we'll see. Maybe he just draws straight into the Drago. Well, certainly drew into outs to it, so he'll be able to play the game.
But this is where we were talking about last turn about keeping that Dragon Sword around might have been to his benefit. I think prior to the Marnie, I saw at least a Regieleki in his hand. I don't know if I saw another one, so maybe I'm not entirely sure. I feel like I would have wanted to play around this Marnie and give myself the opportunity to see more cards, because as it stands, I think he drew a pair of Choice Belts, a Path, and a Quick Ball. So yes, the attack will come down, but he's not going to have much of a follow-up. It's going to be down to Dragon Sword on the following turn.
Absolutely. And he did draw a Gift Energy, it looks like, on the top deck. So
Oh, that's very nice.
it is. But per what you're saying, he also chose not to Quick Ball it away. But maybe he has a second Quick Ball he's planning to use?
I think he's just going to attach it and then just
that makes
just
sense.
getting rid of the belt because it's
Absolutely.
another expendable card.
So I think, like you said, having the Dragon's Horde to go into would have been very valuable here. But Regidrago's not a bad attacker. And unfortunately, Jarek seems very displeased with his hand in the situation right now. So at this point, Christian seems like he has the opportunity to go up a little bit if he's able to take the knockout here around the Gift Energy.
I think it's interesting that he's displeased about it, especially considering the fact that there's the Gift Energy there.
Right.
Like, you're going to get to, I think he's going to get to draw a fresh 6, because I think he's taking a prize card, so I think he's going to get 6 plus the draw for turn, so he's going to see 7 extra cards, like, most likely, unless Christian wants to gust around it. One interesting thing to note is that, luckily, since Jarek has the bad Alecki down, Christian's own bad Alecki cannot ping around this Regirock, which cannot attack, and he can't try and leave him with a 2-card hand, unable of attacking.
And that, I think, is exactly what Christian's going to do, is ping around it, and then ideally go into his good Alecki the next turn to try to spread and continue to take those prizes. Because Jarek's not going to be able to attack this turn with the Regirock. He will have to be able to attack with something else. And it looks like Christian's prepping Regigigas for an attack. And this is interesting because Jarek is going to be able to attack with something else. So I'm curious what the plan is here.
I think he's just trying to play around Gift Energy for the turn.
Agreed. knowing that Jarek is going to get a knockout. But unfortunately, Christian's not going to be able to take a knockout this way.
That's really interesting. Maybe I'm thinking about how the cape interaction would work, and if that would put him on a price trade where he gets ahead. But I think, just how this game has panned out, regardless, he's going to.
Oh, Christian, I think, has made an interesting call here. He's going after the Regis steal. And I like that because seeing that Jarek didn't go in with the Regis steal when Christian had the Regice active may make him think that the Regis steal is what he's lacking.
Yeah,
And
that is true.
So if he takes that out, he may be able to buy a couple turns back, even if he doesn't take the knockout here.
Right. Yeah. That's gonna take a while to play out, of course. But he's gonna have to retreat this turn. Probably. Let's see what on his board can take a knockout. The Regidrago and the Regigigas. But if he needs an energy card to attack with the Gigas, but since he already attached, that means the only attacker that can attack is this Regidrago, which we know
Absolutely.
he's already down one of.
Yes.
So maybe there's a chance for Christian to play around Gift Energy for another turn and set up another knockout somehow. It seems a little far-fetched.
But I give Christian credit on this because I think he recognizes that with 2 Rod down, with very few cards in hand, Jarek is at a point of weakness. So trying to advance his prize state or his prize board, what am I saying? Get his prizes.
Right.
Short term may be good to keep up, but it's probably better to long term let Jarek take a couple prizes here, get more of a lead, knowing that he's going to lock Jarek out of the game for the next couple turns if he does so.
I think he also realizes that the way this game was heading prior to this interesting series of events, Christian was going to lose, as you were mentioning, lose the prize trade. Just looking at the board right now, if they were to trade over and over again, and Christian is assuming that his opponent will always choose the right attacker, Christian realizes that he's not going to ever be able to punish his opponent for picking the right attacker. There's not really a ton of outplay that can happen there. So instead, he's trying to start this earlier in the game so that he has enough turns to execute that plan.
And interesting, it looks like Jarek is going to choose to also snipe the bench somewhere.
I think he might target down maybe the cape, trying to say that your cape is now useless, which would be funny because we're just mimicking each other.
There you go. It looks like. All right, and we'll see what we get off the top deck here for Christian. Because honestly, for Christian, I think knocking out the Registeel on the bench is probably the best move here. Because Jarek's not going to be able to attack the active. You're still playing around Gift Energy. Jarek has a few cards in hand because of the speed energy, but not much. So you could be putting yourself in a good position, assuming you're okay with the Registeel getting knocked out.
Right. The longer, at this point, the Cape of Toughness is useless. It's as if it's just a regular Registeel on the bench. I don't think that 120 matters for anything other than the fact that the Cape of Toughness is gone.
Absolutely.
So I think he just has to play as if he does not have a Cape of Toughness in his deck anymore. But looking at this turn, like you said, I think it's in Christian's best interest to go around that Gift Energy and try and like you said, target that Registeel, hope that in a combination of the absence of ordinary rods, or maybe in a prizing, the Registeel that he cannot chain another attacker and can put the prize trade back into his favor.
Absolutely. And I think one thing I want to note, too, compared about this game to some of the previous ones, you can see the pace of play by both players here is significantly slower than some of the other players. And don't slow play, people. That's not what I'm saying. What I do want to note is both Christian and Jarek are carefully considering their decisions, the implications of the moves they make, so that way when they make the move, they're confident that it is the right thing to do in the right order. And I think that's a good lesson to take for anyone playing the game of, when you make a decision, make sure you're making the right decision in the right order. And it looks like Christian has the information he needs. He's going to move forward. Though I'll be honest, at this point, I would probably say make a call, sir. So we'll see what Christian decides to do here.
I think the pace of play is indicative of the effect of Christian's play on the board state.
Interesting. So we're going to see the boss, and I think we may see a knockout on this Regidrago.
I like this play.
I like this play a lot.
Because now he can go with that Battle Lucky play next turn. He can do this turn. He's just changing up the order a little bit. But this way, there's no chance for Jarek to top deck a Twin Energy and then Dragon Sword into playable cards or a Scoop Up Net. He's saying, all right, you have to top deck a single card to stay in the game. Because if Jarek does not top deck a card next turn, Christian will be ahead in the prize trade.
Absolutely. And as much as I said one thing about sequencing, you got to play stuff like the Energy Lotto first. You're not drawing any cards. You get all your information first and then make the plays. But I think Christian was clearly locked in on the Energy Lotto is going to get burned no matter what, so let's just do the thing. All right, it looks like we are going to take a knockout on this Regidrago, take a prize, and now we may see an electromagnetic sonar here.
Yeah, that promotion of the Regieleki is indicative of that. This gift energy is not. It's going to allow. Oh, there's
Oh,
a
we do see a
research.
research. All right. So Jarek is clearly back in this game, got the full hand. And I mean, to Christian's credit now, he can feel good about just hitting into the gift energy.
But what's very important is, and we can't forget about this, is the fact that Jarek is still down 2 Ordinary Rod and 2 Regidrago. So he's going to
Absolutely.
need Rod and a way to search out that Regidrago. And I think my eyes might be deceiving me, but I feel like I saw an Ordinary Rod in the prizes. Not entirely sure, though.
I could not tell. So your eyes may be sharper than mine, but also I'm old. So
We might be
you
able to
know.
tell based on what he gets off the sonar. If it's an Ordinary Rod, I feel like it's an Ordinary Rod no matter what, because you need to get back those Regidragos, but I think that could
Absolutely.
be a telltale sign.
Yep, there it is. It's going to be true. And so Christian here, by doing this, by taking that slow strategy, has now shifted the prize trade where now he
Right.
is in command.
This is huge for Christian because now he doesn't have to worry about playing around gift energy. He just has to make sure that he can attack with the right Regi every turn, which this Ordinary Rod, get back a Drago. He's going to have at least 2 Drago attacks as long as he has access to a Quick Ball in his hand or some sort of way to bench a Pokemon. So it's looking pretty good for Christian.
And that is a big research to just get everything out of his hand, thin his deck down to almost nothing. And the nice part is looking at what's in there, he didn't really get rid of many resources he needs to keep.
Yeah, the only card in there that's a little unfortunate is the Stormy Mountain, to be honest, because that is an out to both Regieleki and Regidrago. But if you're drawing 7 cards, odds are you're going to end up seeing those Pokemon anyway.
Absolutely. And he sure as heck does not want to put that down and make it easier for Jarek to get that Drago back out.
Exactly.
Because Jarek, like we're saying, he put the Ordinary Rod in his hand, so he knows he's going to be able to put the Drago right back in.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're going to see the scoop up net on the Registeel, which is nice because now Registeel's not within bad lucky snipe range.
Right. Like I mentioned before in that turn when the snipe came down, it's like you're playing without the cape, so netting the cape does no harm.
Absolutely. All right, so I think we are eventually going to see a knockout on this Regieleki here. And honestly, what an excellent use of his 1 gust in this game by Christian to take that knockout and buy another turn.
Yeah, that was a pivotal turn. It was probably the only turn where he can play around gift energy and play around top decking, which Jarek still top decked, and it didn't do anything because of the fact that both Regidragos were down, 2 Ordinary Rod were down, and he doesn't play any stadiums that are able to search it out, so we had to have a direct draw.
Absolutely. And it looks like we are going to see the Ordinary Rod for the Drago, and then I gotta imagine, yep, the other Drago. Makes complete sense. And so for Christian, he's got to feel good because even if Jarek does respond, Christian just needs to take 3 more knockouts before Jarek takes 4.
Right. I think he's debating whether or not he wants to put that Regieleki since he needs both for the board, but I mean, I think yeah, Jarek's playing 3 copies of Regieleki in total, so it's just better to have 2 of each in the deck than a 3 and 1.
Absolutely, because at this point, putting the Battle Lucky down is not ideal, but he just needs to stream attacks.
Yeah, he just needs to attack. At this point, with the way the trade's going, there's no longer as big of an advantage to having the Battle Lucky down because you're just going to be swinging. We know Christian's board. We know that he has 2 Regidragos left through that Ordinary Rod and the fact that there's 1 on the bench. So Jarek knows that he's likely just going to have to get through 2 more Regidragos to finish this game.
Absolutely. And one thing to note, the way Christian was playing it before when Jarek had view cards in hand, Christian was playing in a manner that you and I, or I've talked to someone about today, of he didn't have it. Christian's playing around the fact that Jarek isn't going to be able to respond.
Mm-hmm.
But at this point, with how thin both players' decks are, with how many cards they have available in the discard for energy, both players kind of have to assume that their opponent's going to have it.
Right. Yeah, that was Christian's only way back into the game was playing the game of he doesn't have it, or just just hoping, because again, as we've talked about a number of times already, the way the Regi prize trade works is you have to assume your opponent's just going to attack every turn and take a knockout. So the only way to do that is to stop them from attacking for a couple turns, which is exactly what Christian did. But as we said, it was all playing into the mindset of he doesn't have it.
Absolutely. And so we do see Jarek get ready to take the knockout here with Regirock. And if I'm Christian, not knowing what's in Christian's hand, I gotta imagine taking out the Registeel's to play.
Yeah, I think, well, he could take out the Registeel. I don't know if there's Registeel in the discard or not. I don't think there was one in the prizes when we saw the Hisuian Heavy Ball. So I think, yeah, and with the telegraphed play of putting up this Actually, it's not that telegraph due to the pivot, but he
Right.
could just also use this Regieleki and say, I've powered it up. I've used my resources. I can use my Gigas to power up something else, for instance, the Regidrago. So now I'm just going to attack with this Regieleki. Additionally, the Regirock can't attack again.
And that's exactly it, because Jarek will need, if Christian does knock out the Registeel, Jarek will need a ability to move the Regirock and an ability to get the steel out to attack with someone different. And it could be Scoop 'em Net, could be Retreat. But Christian at that point is just saying, like, I think you have less resources left than I do, so I'm going to make you burn as many as you can. So for Christian, assuming he does take the knock on this Registeel, what do you think is his play next?
As he's doing right now, I think it's just to continue to set up attackers and put yourself into a position where if somehow, some way, a Marnie or a Research or the current hand he's sitting on does not have what it takes to get to another attack, I think it's just setting yourself up to not be punished by that.
And interesting, he actually knocks out the Regieleki. Again, thinking that there's already one in the discard for Jarek, so how easy is it going to be to get out another one?
I think the other thing to consider is he's just playing around that gift energy on the bench.
Very true, very true. I didn't quite see how many cards Jarek had in his hand.
I think his goal is to play around gift energy for as long as possible, force Jarek to continue to have it, and play around that until he knows he cannot lose the game, which going into next turn, if he can set up 2 attackers, being Drago and Regigigas, I'm fairly certain that he cannot get punished.
Oh boy, we are discarding a Regidrago here. Interesting. So one thing I will note, we talked a lot today about playing to win and also making decisions that don't lose you the game. The one decision I'm a little sketchy on Christian's end is accelerating all that energy to Regigigas. Because by accelerating it to Regigigas, if Jarek bosses up and knocks out the Regigigas, Christian needs to find another one or he has no attackers. If he has, say, accelerated that to the Regidrago or something, and Jarek bosses it up, he still has more availability of attackers there to try to respond. All right, we do see Jarek's last Ordinary Rod put a Regieleki and a Regidrago back into the deck.
The last thing to consider, and I think Christian has kept this in mind for the entire game, is that Jarek still hasn't put his Cape of Toughness down yet.
Correct.
Which is probably why he's kept that 120 damage on that Regieleki around, or Registeel around, saying that this turn Jarek has to find Cape, otherwise that Registeel is going to go down unless Jarek finds access to a scoop-up net. However, I think at this point we've seen Jarek play a handful of scoop-up nets.
We have. And it looks like, all right, we are going to see the retreat. We are going to go into the Regidrago, which makes complete sense. We will draw, and we see another Regieleki off the top deck, which is not bad. It's certainly not bad. But I think we are going to see the knockout with the Drago here, and I'm not sure what else Jarek is going to do. Oh, Jarek still had a Research in hand. Oh, wow.
Another thing to consider on the topic of Cape, because I'm pretty sure that's what he's digging for at this point, is Christian could attack into to whatever has the Cape, and as long as there's no scoop-up net...
Ooh, and we see the last Registeel go down, which, to be fair, matters less now because Regidrago can just attack. But I'm sorry, keep going.
Now, it's clear that Jarek did not have the Cape of Toughness as shown a little bit by that body language. But I was going to say is, if he was down enough scoop-up nets, then Christian could set up a play to have the Goodaleki take the remaining 2 prizes and play into that Cape of Toughness play. But since Jarek still had 1 scoop-up net remaining, that play would have been nullified.
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, we are going to see Jarek just attach 2 energy? Interesting. Okay, we are going to go for all 3. We were just in the midst of that, grabbing that gift energy.
I think he was trying to see if he would deck himself out by gift
that's
energy,
fair.
Durmarni and whatnot. But I don't think, as long as he doesn't play like all of his cards from his hand, I don't think that's possible.
Well, we are going to see a scoop-up net. So this is interesting, taking the Regieleki off the board to prevent Christian from using Goodaleki to take 2 prizes and win the game this turn. And I like that play a lot. However,
he's down boss.
He is down boss. And also, that means that if Christian does Marnie, it could be that Jarek doesn't find either of his remaining outs to Regieleki and isn't able to attack.
Yeah, I think, as we mentioned, Christian's play this turn is just to set up 2 attackers and then try and slow down Jarek as much as possible, because there is still that small window in which Cape of Toughness could help him climb back if Christian is unable to find the Goodaleki or Badaleki.
Absolutely. But to your point of setting up attackers, as long as Christian has at least 1 switching out remaining, setting up Regidrago to hit, I think, basically seals this game up, because then Jarek's only out is to Gust and then hope that he can deck out Christian before he decks out. But looks like Christian still has more cards in deck as well.
Another thing to note about Jarek is he discarded the Regidrago again, so this Drago going down means he needs to find another recovery out for that Regidrago, and I don't know if he has them anymore.
And we do see the Marnie. And so this is big because now if Jarek doesn't get an out to the Lecky or an out to another Drago, like he said, he could just not be able to attack this round or
Right.
this turn. All right, so let's see. Does Christian find... It looks like he found a capture energy, if I'm seeing that right. Maybe not. All right, and at this point, I do understand the shuffle the hand. All right, so he must have found something good off of that Trek and Shoot to just call it a day right there.
I think it was a quick ball, yep.
All right, perfect. So we do the quick ball. We are going to get the Lecky. Looks like it's the bad Lecky, or good Lecky at this point. And then we likely will see Regigigas accelerate to the Regidrago, if I had to guess, like we were saying, knowing that there's no way for Jarek to take 2 prizes next turn. So then if you're Jarek, how do you try to win this game at this point?
The small window I see is the Cape of Toughness and then picking up that Registeel and then just have another instance of the you don't have it mindset.
Fair.
Because we know that Christian's down his boss. I'm sure Jarek knows that he only plays 1 boss and that he's down that. So it's a small window.
And that's fair. And then with this knockout, if Jarek has the cape in deck, he's going to see it. Oh, but it looks like he does not.
Considering how many times he's counted his deck and the dissatisfaction that he was showing in the previous turn, I think he has it and just hasn't found it yet. But actually,
No,
I don't
'cause
even
he
know if
just
that's
saw the
possible.
entirety
Yeah,
of his
that's
deck.
right. He just saw new cards again, so I'm not sure.
So it may be prize then, one of his last 2 prizes.
And it looks like we're in time as well, being shown by that die.
Which is honestly fine because Christian will only really need 1 more turn to win the game.
Right. And Jarek would only need 2 more turns to win the game himself, so this game will end one way or another.
Absolutely. And this is also under the assumption that Christian has no more switching outs available, which, actually, I say that as long as all his board is full of Regis, he has a switching out.
Right.
Still has plenty of energy in the discard.
I don't really know what there is that Jarek can do to climb back into this game. I think that's what he's looking for at the moment.
I agree. And I appreciate the kind of digging in and trying to map it out, but I guess we are in time. So
Yeah.
at this point, the game's going to finish.
I think this is the first game we've had that actually went to time. As you mentioned earlier, these players were playing at a more slower, methodical pace, thinking through every action, and it's showing by the length of this game.
Absolutely. And the other wrinkle, too, is it's a single prize matchup. So there's a minimum 6 attacks to take knockouts. And
Right.
clearly on both ends, we had a couple turns of not taking those knockouts.
Right. I think that made this game really fun to watch, though. Christian, seemingly at a disadvantage, managed to find a very interesting route based upon Jarek's discards of Ordinary Rod and Regidrago, something which I was overlooking at the beginning of the game, saying that I don't think it was important, but Christian managed to find a way to take that to his advantage.
We do have someone in the chat saying that Christian should have attached a Forest Seal Stone to Regis. I don't know if I'd actually argue that. Thinning the deck is good. Christian may be leaving it as an out to drop his Pidgeot if there's a Stadium Bounce out in the deck to then get the search out he needs. But otherwise, thinning is winning, so can't argue that. All right, so it looks like Jarek does advance the Regirock, and now we're seeing if he has the outs available to get the attack off this turn. Though knowing that even if he does, Christian's got the game.
Yeah, I was when you were talking about the Forest Seal Stone play, I'm pretty sure that that's a joke. I'm pretty sure that Holucha knows Christian, that he was just making fun of him for playing Forest Seal Stone, which is kind of confirmed by Sandy, but
I guess I got played.
I mean, the joke in the first place is the inclusion of Pidgeot and Forest Seal Stone into Regigigas, but
That's fair. Well, he clearly didn't need either of them today.
all right. Well, at least not for this round. I'll
Fair.
have to ask him and see how many times he's used it today.
Absolutely.
If he says more than once, I'll be impressed.
All right, so we did that. That looks like a Regirock. I don't know why that wouldn't be coming down the field. All right, so we are seeing a slow, methodical review of our decisions by Jarek. And that is indeed a Regirock. That is a cape.
And that's 2 Regirocks on the board. I'm pretty sure that Jarek just doesn't have access to recovering those Dragos.
I would agree at this point. So I think Jarek may be thinking, is there a way to stall this out by plopping up the Regirock?
But I think he has 1 more scoop up net left.
Christian has 2 turns, and in those 2 turns, I think if he just attacks with the good Alecki and spreads to everything, he can't lose.
Maybe. I don't know how many scoop up net Jarek has remaining.
Well, he only drew 1. So if he had 2, he could scoop up the Registeel, scoop up the active Regirock, and leave the Reggie in the active. But unfortunately, it looks like you only saw 1 off of the Serena. And to Jarek's point of playing the Serena over the Research, if he had played the Research, that's a game because he would have milled himself out.
Right. Looking at Jarek's list, he plays 4 scoop up net compared to Christian, who plays 3. So I guess that line of drawing the scoop up nets was all he had left.
Absolutely. And it looks like he is going to advance the Regirock, which is out of range of either the Regigigas or the Regidrago.
One thing I just noticed in Christian's list is he plays an escape rope, which I don't know if it's been played this game or not, but that is yet another out that is not a supporter that can help him to close out this game.
Absolutely. I don't think we've seen it yet, but we may find out here in a second. It looks like Jarek is, again, very methodically deciding which person to advance here. We'll see. Some explanation about the number of cards in his deck. All right. Well, we're going to have to see. I feel pretty confident saying that Christian has this one about wrapped up. But he's very patient in watching Jarek kind of talk through his decision here. I think Jarek's talking about the things he needed to draw that he didn't quite see. All right.
I think Christian's like, all right, I get it, but we need to finish the game.
That is also the expression I'm reading from Christians. I'm like, yeah, totally fair. That makes sense. Now put someone up.
While they continue to talk about this, we do have some confirmed top 8s. We have a fan favorite, Larry Rusano, playing that Mew VMAX in top 8.
My man, Larry.
We have previously streamed Gage playing the Lost Box Rayquaza and Raikou. He's in top 8. We have Owen also on stream with the quote optimal Reggie Stadium count in top 8. Chris Hogue also on stream with Regigigas with the regular boring 4-path to the peak. Sorry, Chris. Christian Sr. playing Lugia V-Star, who was also on stream. And lastly, Joe Storino playing Hisui and Goodra V-Star, who is also on stream. So
what
the
you're
stream has
saying
been a hit.
Yes, we picked the right people,
Yeah.
is what you're saying.
I think we're the good luck charm.
Excellent. Well, we did pick Larry about 3 times, so that probably helps.
Right. Well, I mean, if you're getting picked, that means you're doing pretty well, right?
Absolutely. All right, so it looks like we have locked in on the Regirock. We are about to pass the turn. There's the pass. And let's see. Do we have the escape rope?
Pretty sure all I have to do is retreat and attack with Reggie Lucky.
Well, I think the HP... Oh, yeah, with Regilucky, correct. So, yep, so we will see a retreat from Regigigas. We'll go into Regilucky. And then we will use the bad Lecky to take many, many knockouts this game and win the game.
All right, and Christian will be our 7th entry into the top 8.
Maybe. We still have to see how Resistance pans out, but Christian may very well be the one to sneak in. And he is currently number 8 on standings coming into this round.
Christian got up paired. He was at 3 and 2, so he will be on the bubble.
Yes, Christian is at 3-2, will be on the bubble, but with Jarek losing and going to 3-2-1, there will actually be 2 4-2s at a minimum that could make it in.
And another round, we had, I believe it was Tyler Liu who also won at 3 and 2. So we had
Tyler did win.
Yeah, so we had the 8th and 10th seeds going into this round win. I'm not sure what happened with Parker at 9th seed. We'll have to figure that out.
Absolutely. So we're going to go take a quick look at that, figure out who's going to be in top 8, and we'll be back to you guys for the first round of top 8 shortly. So thanks for watching. We'll talk to you in a few. Well, thank you all very much for joining us today. I come to you with both good and bad news. The good news is Christian did make top 8. Parker, who was previously on stream, also made top 8. The bad news, everyone decided to split, and as they say, take their money and run. So this was still a good event. We had 8 people walk out with more than $100 each after coming into play for a little bit. So I appreciate the time y'all spend hanging out with us. So Frank, any last thoughts before we end the stream here?
No, I thought we had some very great, very interesting games. It was nice to be able to commentate. It was really fun. I had a great time.
Absolutely. And I think there was a good mix of decks that really covered just like the standard format. The standard format really is condensed around a few archetypes, but I think we did get to see each of them played with varying caliber of excellence at certain times, but we at least got to see how they work and where they can go wrong.
Right. I think this format is judged as sometimes with one with less skill, and I think today we saw just how much skill can play a role in these games, as we saw in the games with Mew. Larry was able to
put himself in positions where he couldn't lose the game, which is something that some players are unable to do with Mew. We saw in the Reggie games, Christian was able to mount a comeback from a seemingly poor position, or we saw in Lugia mirror matches, interesting trade-off. So there were a lot of interesting interactions today, and I think it was a testament to how skilled the format truly can be.
Absolutely. And like we said, we do have our April 1K coming up April 29th, and that will be with rotation and Scarlet and Violet. So it is going to be a brave new world in a couple weeks come April 29th. So we'd love to see you out here. If not, we'll be happy to talk to you on the stream. And just remember that most Thursdays for our locals, we are going to be streaming as well. So if you want some good Pokemon content, listen to us talk about our Poke Thoughts. We'd love to have you out here. So have a great night, everyone. It was great talking with you, and we hope we hear from you again soon.